Part 23. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 222. Should I not go back to Yaokai? Looking at the two land immortals in front of him and the black-dressed woman beside him who was full of oppression, this thought flashed through Musian's mind. Then, he was relieved again soon. No, it's not that he shouldn't go back to Yaokai, but no one expected that these people would turn against each other without any cover-up. Logically speaking, this is a very strange thing. Even if they can really get rid of the people in Yaokai Holy Land without anyone noticing and get the Tiandan Phoenix fruit, what can they do? How to send it to the pilgrimage hall of Lianji sect to the first-generation demon emperor? There must be some invisible conspiracy in this. After the Qing emperor comes out of retreat, none of you can escape, a Yaokai elder on the side shouted angrily. During the Qing emperor's retreat, is there still room for resistance? Fu Yuan smiled lightly. The man in green robe also sneered, others will naturally take action on her side. Those who can establish such a huge force in Dongzhou are naturally not fools. Since they dare to act, they are mentally prepared. Some forces in Dongzhou are responsible for the Yaokai Holy Land, while the Qing Emperor is handled by the demon cultivators. The other party is not afraid of the Qing Emperor, but wants to defeat her while she is condensing the cauldron. This answer made many people in Yaokai tremble with fear. Fu Yuan, we are not from Yaokai. Let me go. I swear not to disclose any information about this place, an elder of an ancient family said. He is from another ancient family. It was just a coincidence that he appeared here, but he didn't want to encounter this. These two pavilion masters are both returned to Void Grade 5. With the blessing of the ancestral artifact, most of the return to Void realms can hardly resist. Since they chose to take action at this time, they naturally brought the ancestral artifacts of the clan, so they dared to be so unscrupulous. Next, 3 or 4 elders expressed their opinions and vowed not to disclose the things here and wanted to leave. Fu Yuan raised his eyebrows slightly, glanced at them, and said, since you are so sincere, I will not make it difficult for you. You can leave on your own. Is this person so kind? Musian looked at the elders who left, frowned slightly, and always felt an indescribable strange feeling in his heart. Then, he suddenly heard a scream coming from outside the Yaokai Holy Land. It was the voice of the elders who were about to leave. Musian turned his head suddenly and saw a person walking out of the Holy Land. No. That can no longer be called a person, but a monster. It has tentacles all over its body, an octopus head, and a pair of bat wings on its back. It looks ferocious and weird. People from the southern wilderness, a Yaokai elder almost blurted out. It is said that in the southern wilderness, their god is in this posture, and you cannot look directly at him, because when you see him, you will see the fear deep in your heart. And the tribesmen of that god are also such monsters. Of course, there are not many such monsters, but each of them is at least the strength of returning to the void, and their bodies alone can resist several attacks from the ancestral artifacts. I didn't expect that even people from the southern wilderness would come. This incident not only involves the demon worlds of Dongzhou and Bezhu, but also the shadow of the southern wilderness. Some people don't want Dongzhou to have another empress, so they want to kill him and revive the first generation of demon emperors to cause chaos in Dongzhou. Miss Lena, I have to ask you for this, Fu Yuan said with a smile, but he also looked at this strange creature that looked thrilling with fear. Not only are you colluding with the remnants of the previous demon emperor, but you are also involved with the southern wilderness. Aren't you afraid that there will be no place for you in Dongzhou in the future? The Queen Mother of Yaokai stared at the two of them, with a little more shock and anger in her tone. I said, it's you who colluded with the Demon King, not us. Fu Yuan smiled faintly. The truth is only in the hands of the living. The dead can't speak. The next moment, the smile on Fu Yuan's face disappeared, and he sacrificed the ancestral weapon of the clan. This is an emperor-level weapon. Although it looks dilapidated and even a little rusty, the deterrence it exudes at this time makes the faces of the people present change. The Queen Mother of Yaoqi also sacrificed an ancestral weapon behind her. Looking at the three people in front of her, her face became a little more heavy. These two may not know that they are just being used by others, but in order to have the opportunity to advance to the realm of enlightenment, they still chose this path. There is the shadow of Nanhuang behind this incident, which is the reason why they can be so unscrupulous. My friend Mu, I will do my best to send you and Yao Yu away from here with other elders, and then send a signal to reveal their true colors. Muzian suddenly heard the voice of the Queen Mother of Yaoqi in his ears. He glanced at the beautiful woman in the distance calmly, and then nodded silently. He was an extremely calm person who knew what to do and when. He could not intervene in the battle at the return to void level, but as long as the signal was transmitted to the outside world, they would win. Ding! At this moment, an ancient bell sounded suddenly in the Yaoqi Holy Land. This was one of the Yaokai's ancestral artifacts. Just hearing this sound at this time made people feel as if their souls were about to fly out. When everyone was in a trance, Muzian glanced at the Yaoqi saintess and others not far away, and almost without any hesitation, he flew with her towards the outside of Yaoqi. Humph. However, at this moment, a cold snort suddenly sounded. With just one sound, Muzian felt discomfort in his internal organs. This was the pressure of the return to void realm, and also the blessing brought by the ancestral artifact. It was difficult for the return to void realm at the same level to resist, let alone the refining spirit realm. There seemed to be something on the body of the saint of Yaoqi that resisted the pressure brought by this voice, but she was also a little uncomfortable. Her face was a little pale, but she still gritted her teeth and wanted to rush out of the backyard. Fu Yuan sneered and was about to attack. At this time, the Queen Mother of Yaoqi also raised her hand, and the spiritual energy turned into a huge sword blade and rushed towards him. The elders of Yaoqi beside him attacked one after another, their eyes were red, and they seemed to want to escort the saint of Yaoqi away from here even if they died. However, several old men beside Fu Yuan also attacked, which also announced the beginning of this melee. Shouts of killing rang out in Yaokai, but could not be heard outside. Everyone could clearly feel the sound of weapons colliding and the pressure of spiritual energy. The green-robed man in Zihong Pavilion laughed heartily. Do you really think you can leave here? You can't escape unless the barrier is destroyed. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned his head to look at the slender back of the Yaokai saint who seemed to be about to leave in the distance, revealing a playful look like a cat playing with a mouse, and raised his hand to grab the void in her direction. No one even noticed what happened. The action of the Yaokai saint flying on the sword was shaken violently, and then fell uncontrollably. The green-robed man snorted coldly, "What can a genius do? Before she grows up, she is just an ordinary cultivator in the refining spirit realm. Shifei, tie her up with a talisman and bring her back to Zihong Pavilion. I still have a lot of use. If she resists, break her hands and feet." For this pavilion master, Shifei dared not be angry but nodded. Yaoqi Saint was also born with a Taoist fetus. He knew exactly what the man in green robe wanted to do, but he had no way to stop her. A pavilion master in the return to void realm actually wants to attack a young girl. If it gets out, your reputation will be completely ruined. Not far away, an elder of Xiantian Pavilion couldn't help but sneer, looking at Yaoqi Saint with regret in his eyes. Who wouldn't want to get a Taoist fetus? Fairy Yao Yu, you can't blame me for this. I will ask my father to save your life in the future, Shifei said. Although he couldn't get a Taoist fetus, he could also imprison Yaoqi Saint in the clan. Such a beauty, he would never get tired of playing with her for a lifetime. Staring at the soft figure of Yaoqi Saint, Shifei's eyes revealed a trace of greed. Yaoqi Saint bit her lips tightly and could only watch Shifei take out a talisman and then stick it on her body. However, In the next moment, there was a sound like breaking the wind behind him, and the Lone Star sword blasted out with lightning speed and pierced into Shifei's chest. This sudden attack caught people off guard. Shifei spurted out a mouthful of blood and slowly lowered his head to look at the sword blade that pierced his chest. The man in green robe also reacted and turned his head to look behind him, but he happened to see a scroll unfolding instantly, which was about to suck him into it. 8 Desolate Dream Map. The Saint of Yaoqi hesitated slightly, and then, suppressing the stabbing pain in her chest, turned around without hesitation and rushed out of Yaoqi. However, the outside world had already been surrounded by disciples from the 2 major pavilions. Most of them were only in the Qi training realm, but even with the human sea tactics, it was enough to continuously consume the spiritual energy in the Yaoqi Saint's cauldron. This also greatly hindered her progress. On the other side, the man in green robe emanated a wave of spiritual energy, instantly blasted open the 8 Desolate Dream Map, and looked at Musian with a gloomy face. A young cultivator in the spirit refining realm actually dared to play tricks on him. At this moment, a charming and seductive voice suddenly came from the side. Musian should be kept, he will be of great use to me later. The woman in black licked her lips charmingly and said softly, I will make him swear not to disclose this matter. In addition, I will also cut his tendons and let him stay at my feet as my pet and not disturb others. However, as soon as the voice fell, the man in green robe snorted coldly, raised his hand and waved it, and a dark green flame blasted out, turning into a sharp blade and blasting towards Musian. The woman in black frowned slightly, but did not speak, just sighed, what a pity. The dark green flame fell in the direction of Musian, but at this moment, the yellow-skirted maid beside her took action in time and blocked Musian with a sword. She stepped back a few steps, seemed a little embarrassed, but still barely blocked the attack. Oh! The green-robed man looked at the yellow-skirted beauty with a little more interest. He hadn't paid much attention to her before. The maid next to Musian seemed to be several times stronger than her master. However, no matter how strong she was only at the spirit refining realm. How many times could she last in his hands? The green-robed man's eyes turned cold, and he raised his hand again, and a ray of blue flame blasted out. It was just a casual attack for him, but when it landed in front of Wei Mengru, it was like a mountain slowly moving from a distance, and a huge sense of oppression came instantly. At this moment, a scream suddenly came from the crowd. The green-robed man glanced and found hundreds of golden firebirds flying in the air, crashing into the disciples who were blocking the Saint of Yaoqi. Most of these disciples are from Zihong Pavilion and Xiantian Pavilion. They are basically in the Qi training realm, so naturally it is difficult to resist this formation. The one who controls the formation is the young man who was born with the physique of a furnace. The man in green robe narrowed his eyes slightly and was about to raise his hand to suppress it. At this time, a Yaokai elder took action in time and got entangled with the man in green robe, forcing him to concentrate on dealing with the enemy in front of him. Although Musian rarely took action in the past, this does not mean that he is really weak. At least he has not met anyone who can defeat him in the same realm. It is just that in the past, he was always protected by people stronger than himself, so it does not mean that he is really weak. He needs to do it himself. A series of hundreds of birds killed dozens of people in a row. They rushed out from the backyard and attacked the 2 major pavilion disciples surrounded in the Yaokai Holy Land. Hearing the screams that kept coming, the green-robed man's eyes finally became a little gloomier. After he raised his hand to block Elder Yaokai's blow, he suddenly turned his head to look at Musian on the ground, and slowly rode. You're going to die terribly. Musian didn't pay attention, or it could be said that he didn't have the intention to answer. At this time, his cauldron was running at high speed, and he was still chewing the elixir in his mouth. He could not intervene in the battle in the return to Void Realm, but the elders of the Yaokai Holy Land and the Queen Mother of Yaokai were able to stop them for the time being. However, if we continue to delay, the situation will become increasingly pessimistic. If you want to leave, you have to try your best. Musian took out a jade bottle again and poured all the elixir into his mouth. Most of these are elixirs for restoring spiritual energy, and they also include a turtle breath pill. I hope the turtle breath pill is useful, but I can't die yet. Musian raised his hand to control the formation in his heart. Each golden firebird penetrated into a monk's body and burned the cauldron to death. He followed the saint of Yaokai, and while the formation was operating, he continued to kill all the monks surrounding him, and the spiritual energy in his cauldron was also flowing away rapidly. Although most of these monks were in the chi-refining realm, even those in the god-refining realm could not handle the crowd. The saint of Yaokai was always shrouded in moonlight, but her face was extremely pale. These monks gradually learned their wisdom during the battle. Only some of them stayed at the door to block them, while the rest fired cold arrows from behind to consume the spiritual energy of Musian and the Yaokai saint. Wei Mengru was also powerless. She was blocked by the woman in black dress and could not help Musian. The woman in the black dress obviously did not intend to kill Wei Mengru, but simply wanted to delay Wei Mengru. The look on her face was always relaxed, as if a cat was playing tricks on a mouse. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. It's not that she doesn't want to kill her, she has a special physique, and just now she felt something strange in the body of the maid in the yellow skirt. If she kills her rashly at this moment, something might happen. Even if there is insufficient supply of the spirit energy of the Hui Yuan Dan, I will really die if this continues. Musian looked at the dense crowd and thought something was wrong in his heart. But if he retreats now, it will undoubtedly make the Yaokai saint the target of public criticism. She will become the target of everyone's fire. If they don't evacuate, they may be handed over here together. At this time, he suddenly felt that the body of Saint Maiden of Yaokai seemed to be emanating an extremely terrifying aura. She turned her head slightly to look at Musian and said through a message, "Mr. Mu, I will send you away from here." Her eyes, which used to be clear and translucent, now turned pale gold. Musian could notice that her vitality seemed to have disappeared a lot. Is this girl so hard-working? Musian was slightly stunned. The saint of Yaokai obviously used some secret method to forcibly improve her own realm, but after this incident, her longevity will also be greatly affected. If she fails to successfully enter the Void Return realm to increase her longevity, she may die midway. However, Musian only saw determination in the eyes of the Yaokai saint. How can I run away from this? Musian sighed inwardly. Then, he took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Get out of the way, he suddenly called. Just as a flicker of doubt flashed through the mind of the Yaokai saint, she saw Musian raising the black sword in his hand. The spiritual energy in his cauldron completely disappeared in an instant, and the Lone Star Sword merged into the surging spiritual energy at that moment. The ground shook slightly, and several Void Return Realm monks who were fighting not far away also noticed this scene. Fu Yuan's face changed slightly, and he said urgently, "Get away quickly." However, his reminder was still too late. When Fu Yuan finished speaking, Musian's sword had already been slashed from mid-air. Concentrate and reach the top. Boom! The sword burst out with dazzling light like a star, causing huge cracks in the ground with Musian as the center. The monk standing in front of him was shattered by the light of the star before he could dodge. The clamor that had just blocked the door was instantly silenced. The Yaokai saint's red lips were slightly opened, and she was also a little dazed. Such an offensive was completely unlike what a second-level god-refining monk could unleash. Go! Musian's message brought the saint of Yaokai back to reality from her sluggish state. His cauldron has completely lost its spiritual energy, and even if he wanted to run away, it would be impossible for him to run away again. The saint of Yaoqi looked at Muzian deeply, and then turned around and rushed out of the Yaoqi Holy Land without hesitation. Muzian retracted his gaze, lowered his eyelids slightly, with a hint of darkness in his eyes. When the saint of Yaoqi asked him to leave just now, he still wanted to leave. But Sister Mengro is still here. I always feel that after leaving, I will live under the shadow of this decision today for the rest of my life. He has never been a good man, but in life, I don't ask for mercy and help the world, but I ask for a clear conscience. Join hands to help the saint to send out the signal of the change in Yaoqi. Several Yaoqi elders looked at each other and burned their own vitality without hesitation. This is the secret method of Yaoqi. If the saint of Yaoqi can use it, they can naturally do it too. Boom. There was a loud rumbling sound from the barrier, but it still did not shake at all. Humph. The elders of the two major pavilions took action and blocked the Yaoqi elders. At this moment, Muzian suddenly felt a pain in his chest, and blood splashed from his body. He slowly lowered his head and saw a blue flame blade piercing his heart. The green-robed man had a gloomy face. He didn't expect that with all the plans, so many disciples would be killed and injured because of a small cultivator in the refining spirit realm. I said, "You will die miserably," the green-robed man said slowly with a gloomy face. Muzian didn't speak, coughing up blood. Why don't people in this world play by the rules? When I was in the refining spirit realm, the enemies in the return to void realm were running around. How can I play this? At this moment, the past scenes kept flashing in Muzian's mind, like a runaway film projector, flashing continuously, until finally, his eyes gradually dimmed. At the gate of Yaoqi Holy Land, countless eyes stared at Muzian. After an unknown period of silence, someone spoke. "He's dead. The pavilion master is mighty. Kill him. What's the use of the natural furnace? It's of no help in the battle." The disciples who were frightened by the Lone Star Sword just now shouted in anger after they came to their senses. Muzian's eyes were blurred. Looking at everything in front of him, the sarcastic smile on the face of the man in the green robe, the clash of swords and knives shouting and killing in the distance, and the shouting monks in front. Those sounds and pictures seemed to merge together in his mind, and then kept speeding up until the end. The brain completely stopped working in the next moment. Muzian slowly closed his eyes. Lianji sect, Tianhe garden. Lin Ling, who was sitting in the other garden eating meat buns, was suddenly stunned for a moment, and subconsciously turned her head to look in a certain direction. There was a trace of confusion in her red eyes. Then, as if she had noticed something, her eyes slowly widened, and the whole sky seemed to be reflected in her pupils. "What is Senior Lin Ling looking at?" Bairuoxi, who had a simple and gentle temperament, noticed Lin Ling's abnormality and asked softly. A few words appeared on the table, and Bairuoxi looked over. There were only a few words written on it. His vitality disappeared. Bairuoxi whispered to herself, and when she found that the words on the table appeared again, she looked over, and her eyes froze. The name on the table was, Muzian. Boom! There was a violent collision in the air, and the lips of the Queen Mother of Yaoqi were extremely pale. She stumbled back several steps, and her chest rose and fell violently. 3 cultivators in the return to void realm, plus the ancestral artifacts, she naturally couldn't handle it alone. If it weren't for the fact that these 3 people were worried that the Queen Mother of Yaoqi would counterattack before she died, and force someone to take the blame, she would have been unable to support it now. The Queen Mother of Yaoqi adjusted her own spiritual energy, her eyes swept across the ground, and then her eyes quickly fell on the young man at the door of the Yaoqi Holy Land. A big hole was torn open in his chest, and blood stained his robes red. At his feet were the corpses of monks, who were killed by the concentrated Lone Star Sword not long ago. The Queen Mother of Yaoqi raised her head suddenly, her face showing anger. "You! What about us?" The man in green robe sneered. "Muzian committed suicide out of fear of crime. What does it have to do with us? Besides, after the death of the Green Emperor, who can help him? A small monk met the Green Emperor because of luck, but the current Green Emperor is still in the period of condensing the cauldron. Although there are 5 elders of the Return to Void realm in the Yaoqi Holy Land guarding there, the one who took action this time was the subordinates of the first generation of the Demon King. They naturally made preparations before they dared to act. Even if the Green Emperor really survived this time and condensed the cauldron, they would have already blocked the secrets and fled Dongzhou with the elixir. Boom! There was a rumbling sound in the air. The man in green robe raised his head slightly and looked at a Yaoqi elder who was constantly bombarding the barrier in the air before his life was about to end. He couldn't help but reveal a hint of sarcasm on his face. I have said that the barrier is impossible to break. Only the caster can break this formation. The Yaoqi elder had a white beard and an old face. There were also golden flames burning in his eyes. He turned around and pounced on the pavilion master of Xiantian Pavilion. However, the next moment, Fu Yuan suddenly moved. His speed was too fast. The ancestral weapon he sacrificed shone with mighty light. He picked up the collar of the Yaoqi elder and then turned around and smashed it on the ground behind him. The Queen Mother of Yaoqi, who was restrained by the other two, stared at Fu Yuan in shock and anger and said, "Fu Yuan, calm down, your physical condition is not good now, be careful of anger." Fu Yuan showed a cold smile on his face and pulled out a sharp blade from the void. The elder of Yaoqi could only watch the sharp blade fall from the air, his eyes full of indignation and despair. Crack! At this moment, a crisp cracking sound suddenly came from the completely blocked Yaoqi Holy Land, and Fu Yuan's movements stopped abruptly. The hearts of several people were shocked and subconsciously looked up. Boom! The ground shook violently, and then a huge palm print fell from the sky. It grabbed the barrier, and then, under countless horrified eyes, it squeezed hard. It was crushed together with the indestructible barrier. At this moment, the sun shone into the gloomy Yaoqi, and the woman in the green skirt in the sun quietly floated in the air, looking down at everything in Yaoqi, like a god. "You are really brave." When the heavenly voice sounded, it seemed as if the time of the whole world had stopped. The man in green robe and others were motionless, like a sculpture. At this moment, their minds were blank. Why is the Green Emperor here? Didn't the previous generation of demon cultivators stop the Green Emperor from condensing the cauldron? Why is the Green Emperor here? Fu Yuan and others screamed in their hearts. The green skirt fairy stood in the air, looking down at the ground indifferently. Looking at the tragic situation in Yaokai, a hint of coldness appeared in her eyes for the first time. These people have been planning the Tiandan Phoenix fruit since early morning, not only the previous generation of demon cultivators, but even the cultivators of the southern wilderness have participated in it. And their purpose is to stop her from returning to the Hedao realm. Because the original Dongzhou was already too strong, and with the addition of a Green Emperor. But they probably wouldn't have thought that everything would be changed because of a little cultivator in the refining god realm. No one would have thought that the buffing effect brought by the natural furnace would speed up the time it takes for the Green Emperor to condense the furnace to such an extent. The green-skirted fairy floated down from midair, scanning everything in front of her. Most of the corpses here were not from the Yaokai Holy Land, but from the monks of the 2 major pavilions. This also made her feel a little relieved. When she was about to retract her gaze, she caught a glimpse of something with the corner of her eye, and her body suddenly stiffened. She stared silently, and after a brief silence, her body trembled slightly. She floated down from midair and walked slowly towards the entrance of the Holy Land. It was so quiet that there was no sound, as if she could hear the sound of everyone's heartbeat. Under countless gazes, she finally came to the gate of Yaokai, silently staring at the black-robed boy who had lost his vitality in front of her. The indifferent expression on her face finally solidified at this moment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 223. The Forbidden Area is one of the only two major forces in Dongzhou. Most cultivators will feel a chill in their hearts just by hearing this name. The reason is because of its curse and the existence in the Forbidden Area. In the past, some cultivators who were not afraid of death ventured into the Forbidden Area to obtain various natural treasures such as the water of reincarnation. Before their strange deaths, they had described some scenes they saw in the Forbidden Area. The sea beast, Kunpeng, which is enough to cover the sky, and the owner of the Forbidden Area in the rumors. In short, whether it is the curse of the Forbidden Area or even the owner of the Forbidden Area, it is a fearful existence for cultivators. Fortunately, among the only two major forces in Dongzhou, Lianji sect remains neutral and has never intervened in any external struggles. If the demon cultivators do not come out, Lianji sect will not come out. Lianji sect has always been the most sacred place in the hearts of cultivators. The Forbidden Area is secluded and has never intervened in external struggles. However, the Forbidden Area is not neutral or anything, but it just disdains to get involved in external struggles. In fact, when the Green Emperor was alive in the past, Yaoqi Holy Land had also reached the level of power in the Forbidden Zone, but after the Green Emperor left, it began to slowly decline. However, even if it is not as powerful as the Forbidden Zone and Lianji sect, Yaoqi Holy Land is also at the first tier level in Dongzhou. However, the attackers of Yaoqi this time are not only two enemy forces on par with Yaoqi, but they also hold ancestral artifacts, and even the southern wilderness is involved, which caught everyone off guard. In short, in the era when the Forbidden Zone did not leave, Yaoqi Holy Land, Xiantian Pavilion, and other ancient families were the top forces in Dongzhou. At this moment, in the depths of the Forbidden Zone, a man in a black robe leaned against the throne and slowly opened his eyes. He heard a song. The song of the spirit dragon. The song was full of sadness and gentleness, and it was like a siren in the sea, bewitching people. Many disciples in the Forbidden Zone trembled uncontrollably in this song, and they didn't even know why the spirit dragon would suddenly sing at this time for no reason. What happened to Senior Linglong? Why did he suddenly? A Forbidden Area disciple couldn't help but look up into the distance, as if he wanted to know the truth. If you look carefully, you will find that they are all Forbidden Area disciples who accepted the Forbidden Area inheritance half a month ago, and after accepting the inheritance, they left the Forbidden Area ancestral land. They never thought that just a few days later, they heard the singing of the spirit dragon again. The Lord of the Forbidden Area slowly raised his head, and his deep eyes seemed to penetrate the hall and reach a certain direction. Then, as if he noticed something, there was a hint of hesitation in his eyes. How could that guy? Although in the world of cultivating immortals, life and death are natural laws, it is not surprising to have any accidents on the way to cultivating immortals. But if that kid died, the Lord of the Forbidden Area looked silently in the direction of the ancestral land. Ya Lingxian was still accepting the inheritance in the ancestral land, but the singing of the spirit dragon this time would probably disturb her. If she woke up from the inheritance and asked about this, how to explain it? Master, did you find anything, under the hall? The great elder of the restricted area looked at the lord of the restricted area and asked slowly. In addition to the great elder, there were several other elders standing side by side in front of the hall. Although they were restrained in their spiritual energy, they could still sense the terror hidden in these elders. These elders were all cultivators in the Return to Void realm. In addition, they had been looking for weapons made by the existence of Thunder God and other beings in the restricted area in the past. Each elder could cause a major earthquake in Zhuzhou with a slight stomp of his feet. The third elder on the side also said, the spirit dragon rarely appeared in the past, but it has made two big noises recently. It's really strange. The last time the spirit dragon made a big noise, it was to propose to the restricted area on behalf of Musian, intending to show that he stood on Musian's side. But this time, what happened? The lord of the restricted area was silent for a while, and said, Musian may have been in trouble. The atmosphere in the hall suddenly solidified. Several elders looked at each other in bewilderment. If it was just an ordinary cultivator in the refining spirit realm, no matter how talented and powerful he was, for them, death would be death. After all, he had little to do with them. But he was still the young lady's Taoist partner. If the young lady knew about this. Now that Ye Lingxian accepted the inheritance of the reincarnated queen, some high-level officials in the restricted area knew about it. If they knew about it after coming out, with the character of the young lady, I don't know how much trouble she would make. Although the girl was always polite and sensible on weekdays, some people who were familiar with Ye Lingxian knew how much the young lady valued feelings. Master, are you sure? The elder spoke slowly, breaking the strange silence. The lord of the restricted area nodded silently. He has no chance of survival. If the young lady knew about it? The third elder frowned slightly, with a bit of solemnity in his eyes. The young lady's inheritance should not be over yet, but the song of the spirit dragon may wake her up from the inheritance. Moreover, the puppets around her are unfathomable, and they may have known about Musian's death, the female elder on the side said. For a moment, several elders couldn't help but talk about it. The lord of the Forbidden Zone sat in front of the throne, and there was a bit more deep light in his eyes. Although he didn't like Musian very much, he was his future son-in-law after all. If Lingxian knew about this, the high and mighty lord of the Forbidden Zone couldn't help but frown. However, it seemed that what he feared would come true. Just when the lord of the Forbidden Zone thought of this, he heard a crisp voice from outside, Dad. The conversation in the hall just now suddenly became silent, and several eyes looked over. A girl in a purple dress was standing at the door of the hall. She had a slim figure and graceful curves. Her smooth hair was tied up with a jade hairpin. She had a sweet smile on her face. I don't know if it was because of the inheritance or something else, the girl's figure seemed to be more mature than before. And there was a mole under the corner of her right eye, which also added a bit of charm to her. Why did you come out so early? The inheritance should not be over yet. The lord of the Forbidden Zone smiled gently and watched his daughter coming. The elders on the side never looked away from Ye Lingxian, but there was a bit of strangeness in their eyes. I just heard Linglong singing, so I wondered if Senior Linglong came to see me again because of Brother Mu's matter. I was a little worried, so I came to see the situation, Ye Lingxian said with a smile. The lord of the Forbidden Zone was silent for a moment, and said, Linglong didn't come to see me. Then he asked again, is the inheritance over? Ye Lingxian shook her head gently and said, the puppet said that it would take about 2 months, but she doesn't have to stay in the ancestral land all the time. After that, she can follow me and wait until she returns to Lianji sect to accept the inheritance again. So I'm thinking about whether I should find a time to go back to the section. Brother Mu should have returned to the sect and wait for me. Ye Lingxian stretched lazily. Today, the aura she exudes has reached the level of refining the spirit. And it is far more than the first level of refining the spirit, but the 5th level of refining the spirit. This terrifying cultivation speed is difficult for even the protagonist to achieve. This is the blessing brought by the reincarnated queen, and it is not just as simple as cultivation. However, when Ye Lingxian's voice fell, there was a strange silence in the hall. What's wrong with you? Ye Lingxian blinked her bright eyes and looked at everyone in confusion. Several elders looked at each other, and then subconsciously looked at the master of the restricted area. Seeing the man nodded imperceptibly, an elder said, Miss. Ye Lingxian frowned slightly. For some reason, looking at these people like this, she had a vague bad premonition in her heart. Under Ye Lingxian's gaze, the elder said, just got the news that Musian may have been attacked and killed in Yaokai. Ye Lingxian was stunned for a moment, standing still quietly, motionless. Yaokai Holy Land. The fairy in the green skirt stared at Musian quietly. After a long silence, She whispered, Yao Meng. This is her name. She didn't answer when Musian asked her before. She just wanted to tease him a little, but she didn't expect that she didn't have the chance to tell him in the end. If even the spiritual consciousness is completely annihilated, even the Green Emperor has no chance to save him. The cultivators in the refining spirit realm have spiritual consciousness in their bodies, and when they reach the return to void realm, as long as the spiritual consciousness is not annihilated, they can reshape the body. But now Musian doesn't even have spiritual consciousness, so naturally he can't be reborn. It is clear that there are cultivators everywhere in Yaokai at this moment, but there is no sound at this moment. The two pavilion masters didn't even dare to breathe. They just looked at each other and saw incredible fear in each other's eyes. It stands to reason that it is impossible for the Green Emperor to condense the cauldron now. This is the information they have known for a long time. But now, the Green Emperor appeared in front of them alive. At this time, the ground began to shake faintly. The strange-looking creature from the southern wilderness subconsciously took a step back, staring at the fairy in green skirt not far ahead in horror. The two pavilion masters almost didn't hesitate, and immediately rushed towards the sky above the Yaokai Holy Land. Facing the Green Emperor, there was no possibility of any counterattack. The two didn't even consider the tribesmen who were still in the Yaokai, and there was only one thought in their minds: escape from here. However, when they flew out of the air, they found that the clouds in the sky seemed to have collapsed. Then, from the clouds, a creature with a human head and a beast body slowly raised the trident in his hand and threw it fiercely in the direction of the two. Boom! The clouds in the sky collapsed completely, and the ground shook violently. The monks in the Holy King City in the distance looked up in horror. The sky was covered with dark clouds, and a huge creature stretched out its big hand that covered the sky and pressed hard on the dark clouds, as if to open the clouds. That hideous face almost occupied half of the sky, covering the entire Holy King City. Thunder God in the restricted area. Many monks' hearts were pounding, their scalps were numb, and only one thought flashed through their minds. The monster in the restricted area has been born. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 224. I'm gone just like that. I haven't touched Sister Lingxuan's legs, I haven't seen Sister Mengru wearing black and white silk stockings, RNM's Zihong Pavilion, give me my life back. Musian was really angry at this moment. Although he couldn't do anything to the return to void realm with his strength in the refining spirit realm, he was still a natural furnace. You don't think about yourself, don't think about your daughter, etc. How could a villain not say a word and stab you in the heart from behind? Musian felt that his current state was very strange. He felt light and fluttery, as if he was suspended in mid-air. He tried to see the outside world, but something blocked his vision, so that he couldn't see anything, and could only vaguely hear the sound coming from outside. Musian gradually calmed down. I'm not dead, but I'm not alive either, this state is a bit strange, he said to himself in his heart, and then, thinking back to what the fairy in the green skirt had just said outside, he couldn't help but sigh with some emotion. Yao Meng, that's her name. I didn't expect that one day I would see the fairy's sad side, and it was because I died. No, he is not dead, at least his spiritual consciousness is still there. As for why other people can't detect that he is still alive, it should be related to the turtle breath pill he ate before. When Musian thought of this, he tried to open the personal interface, and an interface really appeared in front of him. Name, Musian. Achievements, Natural Furnace Cauldron, Friend of Villains, Envious Talents, Natural Spirit Body, Fake, Sword Fairy Body Protection, Fake, Qing Emperor Inheritance, Fake, Heavenly Destiny Saint Body, Fake, Reborn, Natural Tau fetus, fake, heavenly Deo blessing. Status, a wisp of spiritual consciousness. Musian was not surprised by the title of Natural Tau fetus. He had just practiced dual cultivation with the green skirt fairy a few days ago, so it was not surprising that he could achieve the achievement of Natural Tau fetus now. But the last title was a bit wrong. Musian tried to look up the description of heavenly blessing. Every new life is for a better reunion after a long separation. Heavenly blessing? Musian looked at the achievement in front of him, and there was a hint of doubt in his eyes. From the current point of view, except for the initial 3 titles, all other titles were obtained because of the protagonist around him. So it seems that heavenly blessing should also be given by a girl. But why is there no word fake either? He is still alive now. It should be the turtle breath pill that saved his life, but looking at the description of heavenly blessing, this time he is still alive. It seems that this heavenly blessing also contributed to it. When Musian thought of this, his eyes fell on the description of the status. A wisp of spiritual consciousness. There is only a wisp of spiritual consciousness floating in the body, and only the 8th grade soul returning pill can reunite the body. 8th grade elixir? Is this a bit? Musian fell into deep thought. 8th grade elixirs are extremely rare in the 9 provinces. The rebellion of the 2 pavilion masters this time is most likely due to the 8th grade elixir. Because, among the medicinal materials required for the 8th grade elixir, there must be at least one emperor grade medicinal material. If this medicinal material is obtained by someone in the Return to Void realm, the other party may be able to comprehend a trace of Taurime from it, and thus step half a foot into the realm of enlightenment. Each emperor-grade medicinal material contains one of the 3 ways of heaven, earth, and man. No matter which avenue it is, it doesn't matter to those cultivators who want to live forever. As long as they can comprehend the Tao, it is enough. King D didn't seem to notice my current state, because there are suspected emperor-grade medicinal materials in the turtle breath pill. My spiritual consciousness should have been blessed by the turtle breath pill before I died. However, he was not in a hurry. Judging from the state of his spiritual consciousness, if he wants, his spiritual consciousness will gradually become active in his body in a few days. By then, King D will naturally be able to detect that her husband is still alive. Boom. When Musian was thinking about this, he suddenly heard a deafening voice ringing in his ears. What's going on? He tried to peek into the outside world from his body, but he still couldn't see anything. He could only vaguely hear a deafening voice like thunder. The traders of Dongzhou, this time, it's time to settle accounts. The voice resounded like thunder, and many cultivators were shocked, and absurd and uneasy fear surged. The forbidden area has not appeared in the past thousands of years, but this time it suddenly descended in the Holy King City. At this moment, even the ancient families in the Holy King City, the cultivators with deep mansions, and even those old monsters who were practicing in seclusion in the secret room, were unable to stabilize their emotions at this time. Everyone was facing a great enemy, or uneasy fear, or anger, or even despair. The combat power of the forbidden area may not be well known to those casual cultivators, but some of the ancient families have seen a corner of it with their own eyes. The monster with a human head and tail in the sky is the sea-suppressing beast Thunder God in the forbidden area. Every time it opens its mouth, thunder fragments are splashed, and the sound is like thunder, shocking people. Just one body occupies almost half of the size of the Holy King City. This is the Dharma image of Thunder God, and it is warning the people present not to leave the Holy King City. As for the reason, no one in the Holy King City knows at this moment. But no one has left the Holy King City. Now no one knows why the forbidden area came into being this time, but at least no one dares to touch the bad luck of the forbidden area at this time. Anyway, they have a clear conscience, and the forbidden area cannot be unreasonable, at least they will not cause trouble for them without reason. On this day, Many ancient families and even old monsters in Dongzhou who were hiding in the world all looked in the direction of Yaokai Holy Land, secretly guessing the reason why the forbidden area came into being. Dogon Dynasty. The emperor of the human world stood in front of the palace, with his hands behind his back, letting the whistling wind blow his dragon robe, looking up into the distance, and then suddenly said, "National Master, do you know why the black clouds over there are rising?" Not far behind the emperor of the human world, a man in a Taoist robe stood on the observation deck, looking solemnly in the direction of Yaokai Holy Land. His eyes were deep, as if he could see through the palace and reach Yaokai Holy Land directly. The forbidden area has appeared. The forbidden area, the emperor's heart skipped a beat, and he said, "The forbidden area has not appeared in the past 1,000 years. How could it appear this time?" The forbidden area is not only feared by the cultivators in Dongzhou, but even by the emperor who controls the lifeblood of the entire dynasty. The appearance of the forbidden area this time naturally makes people pay attention. The imperial master in Taoist robes looked up at the rolling dark clouds, but did not answer again. He just said faintly, "Your Majesty, the weather is going to change. Go back and rest early to avoid catching a cold." As the trident that pierced the sky and the earth stood outside the Yaokai, the way for the two pavilion masters to leave was also blocked here. They looked up in fear, but only saw the creature covered with thunder under the sky, which was hideous and terrifying. And in the sky, there was another huge shadow passing by, raising a gust of wind. Fu Yuan looked up and saw that creature was like a sea dragon, covering the sky and the sun. It swam in the dark clouds, and then in the next moment, it turned into a big rock shining with dazzling golden light. Kunpeng. This is also one of the strongest beings in the forbidden area. It is famous for its speed in Zhuzhu. In the past, someone had seen this creature in the world sea with their own eyes. It swam out of the sea of the North Continent demon realm, turned into a rock, and then passed through the forbidden area and never left. Why are Kunpeng and Lei Shen here? The pavilion master of Zihong Pavilion looked up at the sky with fear in his eyes, but saw that Kunpeng was approaching in their direction. The fairy in the green skirt also looked up at the Kunpeng in the sky, her green skirt dancing lightly in the wind, but her expression was always calm. Fu Yuan felt a chill coming from behind him, and turned his head to look. When he saw the fairy in green skirt holding Muzian's body and walking towards them, his heartbeat uncontrollably accelerated, and his eyes were filled with fear. At this moment, her green skirt was soaked with red blood, but her skin was always spotless and breathtakingly beautiful. But when he saw her, the man in green robe was filled with fear. The Qing Emperor's cauldron was condensed, and even if the spiritual energy had not been fully absorbed to fullness, it was not something that a land immortal could touch. Why did the Qing Emperor, who was supposed to be attacked, appear here? What were the remnants of the first generation of demon emperors and the god of the southern wilderness doing? The reason they dared to gamble this time was because a god from the southern wilderness was also involved. Normally, it takes more than half a month for the Qing Emperor to condense the cauldron. It was because of these two reasons that they dared to act so decisively and wanted to seize the Tiandan phoenix fruit. But they never thought that the Qing Emperor condensed the cauldron in advance and resonated with the great Dao. And until now, the evil god of the southern wilderness has not appeared. At this time, a wisp of black fog silently permeated outside Yaokai. Yao Meng also noticed this wisp of smoke. She stared at the black smoke in front of her calmly. Every inch of her skin exuded a little silver light, but the blood stains her green dress red. The black fog gradually spread until it finally covered most of the area outside Yaokai. And in the black fog, it seemed that a certain creature was secretly staring at the Qing Emperor not far ahead, as if hesitating whether to take action. The man in the green robe reacted immediately. He seemed to have grabbed the last straw to save his life. He said anxiously, "Lord Evil God, although the Qing Emperor's cauldron has condensed now, he has not yet passed the Yuanshen tribulation. This is a rare opportunity." Hearing this, the creature in the black fog seemed to be ready to move. Then, an unpleasant voice like nails scratching glass slowly sounded in this area, "Leave Lena to me, I will leave on my own later." At this time, in the Yaokai Holy Land, a green lotus covering the entire Yaokai bloomed silently, blocking the actions of everyone, including the strange creature in the South Wilderness before. It has surrendered, not intending to protect them, but only wanting to take away the genius in the South Wilderness. The man in green robe realized this, his heartbeat uncontrollably accelerated, and almost without any hesitation, he immediately turned into a stream of light and wanted to escape from this area. However, in the air, the kunpeng that covered the sky and the sun just bumped into the front of the man in green robe, and the overwhelming pressure came towards him, making people's breathing stagnate. At this moment, the master of Zihong Pavilion had only boundless regret and anger in his heart, as well as a strong desire to survive. What he regretted was not why he had to attack Yao Qi, but why he didn't act faster and more fiercely, take away the Tiandan Phoenix fruit to complete the transaction, and then escape from Dongzhou with the 8th grade elixir. And what made him angry was why even the forbidden area that never intervened in Dongzhou's disputes in the past had a powerful person appear, and from the looks of it, he was coming for him. Knowing that he could not escape, the green-robed man's eyes had a hint of ruthlessness, and the blue flame in his hand was leaping, and the breath in his body surged. This was the price of burning his own essence to forcefully break through the encirclement. The blue flame blasted towards Kunpeng in the air. At the same time, the green-robed man sacrificed his ancestral weapon to suppress the forbidden area. In the air, Kunpeng made a piercing cry, and the sound waves were deafening. The soul of the green-robed man was almost separated from his body. When his brain was still in a trance, the Kunpeng raised his giant claws and slapped him hard in the direction of him. Boom! This blow directly slapped the green-robed man to the ground, and a huge human-shaped mark appeared on the ground. This is why many cultivators are afraid of demon cultivators. Some demon cultivators have huge bodies. It is possible that demon cultivators and cultivators are both in the Return to Void realm and at the same level. But my Return to Void realm is greater than your Return to Void realm. Because, the physique of this kind of divine beast, the cauldron and furnace, are much stronger than ordinary cultivators. The cultivators of the same realm can naturally threaten Kunpeng, but they can only threaten him. A simpler analogy is that the enemy seizes the opportunity and tries hard to operate. Kunpeng loses 30 blood at once. After pulling and attacking 10 times, Kunpeng loses 1/3 of his blood. Then the ad is caught and smashed with a punch. There is no fairness in this world. The physique of the ancient divine beast is much stronger than that of ordinary cultivators. It has no temper. The green-robed man spat out a mouthful of blood, but the anger in his eyes was even stronger. He raised his head suddenly and said angrily, "Kunpeng, stop it. If I explode, you will not feel good. Think it over dash." Pa! Before the voice fell, a slap came down in the air, blowing the green-robed man away. His pupils shrank into pinholes, and there was a trace of shock and anger in his eyes. He sacrificed the ancestral weapon again. However, at this moment, a heavy chain sound suddenly came from a distance. In the air, several golden chains fell from the sky, just binding the wrists of the man in green robe completely. He raised his head suddenly and was about to speak, but suddenly realized that it was extremely difficult for him to even speak. The ancestral weapon of the forbidden area, the lock of the wasteland. Under the dark sky, the huge creature slowly descended from under the sky. Its body seemed to cover most of the sky. A huge palm was spread out, and the back of the hand was pressed against the ground. With this action, the whole ground was shaken violently. In the palm of the thunder god, a girl in a purple skirt walked out. And beside this purple skirt girl, a woman who seemed to have no emotions followed quietly behind her. Although she was restrained, she still made people feel the horror contained in this woman. Many people in the Holy King city were watching the scene in secret. Although they were far away, some cultivators in the Return to Void realm could still roughly see some of the scenes here. They were secretly guessing the identity of this girl, and there was a bit of awe in their eyes. Although it was not clear who this girl was, the two great beasts in the forbidden area respected her so much, so it was obvious that her identity was far beyond people's imagination. The appearance of the forbidden area this time was probably related to this girl. After Ye Lingxian came down from the giant palm of the thunder god, she never looked at the man in green robes from beginning to end. She just stared at the fairy in green skirt not far ahead. Then, she stared blankly at the boy with Yao Meng's hands in her arms, and murmured, "Brother Mew." There was no sound outside the yaokai. Ye Lingxian looked at the boy with blood all over his body, and was a little dazed. Fu Yuan on the side looked at the scene in doubt. At this moment, even a fool could guess that the forbidden area would be born this time, not because of the Green Emperor, but for this little cultivator who was not taken seriously by them not long ago. When Fu Yuan thought of this, he looked at the seriously injured man in green robe again, and his eyes were filled with anger. This idiot! If it weren't for him, the forbidden area would not be born now. The Green Emperor had just condensed the cauldron, and the Yuan Shen tribulation had not yet passed. The Thunder tribulation might come soon. At that time, she would definitely need to pass the tribulation. In this way, there might be a glimmer of hope. But now, Fu Yuan's eyes flashed slightly, looking at the girl who was slowly walking towards Muzian, and quietly stepped back. "Miss, how should we deal with these people?" Between heaven and earth, the sound of the thunder god like a huge bell broke out, and the sound waves spread to most of the area. Ye Lingxian stroked Muzian's face with her slender fingers, and her fingertips seemed to be able to vaguely feel the temperature of the blood. She was silent for an unknown period of time before she whispered with a trembling voice. "Kill them all. Give Lena to me and let us go. I can give the forbidden area and the Green Emperor an imperial-level medicinal herb in the future," the creature in the black fog said anxiously. The Green Emperor's cauldron condensed. Even if the spiritual energy had not been fully absorbed, it was not something it could deal with. If the forbidden area was added. Before, the gods of the southern wilderness and even the subordinates of the first generation of the Demon King wanted to prevent the Green Emperor's cauldron from condensing, but they did not count the forbidden area in their combat power, because they knew that the forbidden area would not take action for the Green Emperor. In Zhuzhou, everyone knew the name of the forbidden area, and they also knew that the forbidden area never interfered in anything in the outside world. What happened to the Green Emperor naturally had nothing to do with the forbidden area. However, this time, the mighty one in the restricted area has emerged. This is an extremely dangerous signal. In the past, when Dongzhou was not united, it already had the strength that made some people in Zhuzhou fearful. If some forces in Dongzhou have close relations with each other, just thinking about it makes people's scalp numb. Yao Mengui lowered her eyes and turned to look in the direction of Lianji sect. "Send him back to Lianji sect first." When she turned around, a seed behind her grew quietly, and then countless vines emerged like crazy, covering the direction of the black fog. There was a wailing sound behind her, and at the same time, in Yaokai, the elders of the two pavilions were completely entangled by the green vines before they even had time to scream. On this day, the two ancient families in Dongzhou were eliminated one after another, and the news spread all over Dongzhou. And in Shenhuang City, several mighty ones in the restricted area were also welcomed. They came to Shenhuang City for only one purpose: to thoroughly investigate the traitor. In less than half a day, several land immortals died in the Holy King City. They were all remnants of the previous generation of demon cultivators, and some were cultivators who colluded with demon cultivators for profit. Many people secretly cursed Xiantian Pavilion and Zihong Pavilion. If it weren't for these two ancient families, they wouldn't have been implicated. And the day after that, Lianji sect also sent several elders and heads to use the qi-seeking technique to thoroughly investigate the traitors who colluded with demon cultivators. This news made many cultivators in the Holy King city cheer, while some cultivators who had colluded with demon cultivators for certain benefits were shrouded in sorrow and were in a state of panic every day. Some old monsters who were in seclusion knew in their hearts that this incident might affect more than just the Holy King city. After this, the major ancient families in Dongzhou would probably thoroughly investigate their clans and eliminate some unclean things, so as not to be implicated by certain problems later. Dongzhou, I'm afraid it will be a big shock. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 225. The emergence of certain taboos in the restricted area suppressed the two great ancient families, and after that, the Lianji sect also sent people out. I also knew that this was a plan to clean up and deal with some of the worms in Dongzhou. Dongzhou was shaken up and down. Some ancient families in the ancient wilderness borrowed talismans of the qi watching technique to check whether there were people colluding with demon cultivators within their own ranks. In the past 2 days, fierce battles occurred one after another in the ancient families in the wilderness. However, even so, some secluded old monsters have never been born. They all know that this incident is just the beginning. Because the gods of the southern wilderness and even the first-generation demon king who participated in it have not yet surfaced. It is even very possible that there are still some creatures from the southern wilderness in Dongzhou now. The descendant of the southern wilderness god is famous in Kyushu. It is called the Invisible Thing. As the name suggests, it is a creature that cannot be seen directly. Because when everyone sees this creature, they will see the fear in their heart. In the past 2 days, someone in the Holy King city saw Qing Emperor traveling around Yaokai with a young man, and even went to the ancestral land. This news surprised many monks in the Holy King city. During this period, Muzian had been to the Holy King city several times, so some people recognized his identity. However, it is still surprising that the Qing Emperor will personally carry Muzian back to Yaokai. But Ye Lingxian, who should have been sad, was uncharacteristically uncharacteristic. She stayed in the Yaokai for 2 days and never left, and the doll beside her, or the reincarnated queen, did not know where she went. Ye Lingxian was sitting alone in the villa, his back seemed a little lonely. Now that she is in the god-refining realm, there will be no problem even if she stays up all night, but she has been sitting in the villa for 2 whole days, which still makes people a little worried. In the early morning of this day, Wei Mengru, whose injuries had healed a little, came to Yaokai's villa and saw Ye Lingxian sitting on a chair, seemingly in a daze, with complex eyes. Even if you are in the god-refining realm, you should still take care of your body. Ye Lingxian did not raise her head, just shook her head and smiled faintly. I'm fine, don't worry. Sister Mengru, what do you want from me? She continued to ask. King Di said that he will be temporarily frozen today. Maybe we can think of ways to revive him later, Wei Menju said. Ye Lingxian was stunned for a moment, and water seemed to flash in his eyes. She lowered her eyes slightly and said Wei Mengru looked at the girl in the purple skirt in front of her and seemed to want to say something else. At this moment, Ye Lingxian had already raised her head first and said, Sister Mengru, don't worry too much about me. I already told you that I'm fine. Zihong Pavilion and Xiantian Pavilion are just pawns of the mastermind behind the scenes. Before I catch the big fish, I know what to do is the best choice. Wei Mengru was silent for a while, then came to sit next to Ye Lingxian. Your inheritance has ended, Wei Mengru asked. She knew that Ye Lingxian didn't want to mention the matter anymore, so she decided to change the topic. Ye Lingxian shook his head slightly and said, Not yet, but you can continue to accept the inheritance after returning to the section. The inheritance of the restricted area lies in the doll that Ye Lingxian created in the past. As long as the doll is around, her inheritance can be restarted at any time. Wei Mengru nodded slightly and said, You are now at the 5th level of God refining. If the inheritance ends, you should be at least at the 6th level or even higher. Yes, Ye Lingxian nodded gently, full of calmness. It only took less than half a month to go from a young monk in the Qi training realm to the 5th level of God refinement. Such a speed of cultivation was beyond the reach of even a genius. Today, Ye Lingxian has begun to show her talents, and in the future, she will slowly leave her fellow monks further and further away. Muzian's guess in the past was correct. If Ye Lingxian had not conquered her when she was young, it would be almost impossible to conquer her in the future. Because Ye Lingxian is far ahead of her peers in both character and talent. After the two chatted for a while, Wei Mengru's eyes suddenly fell on the snow lotus in Ye Lingxuan's hand. This snow lotus looks familiar to her. Because she also has the same snow lotus on her hand. However, the flower in Ye Lingxuan's hand has withered. Brother Mu gave this to me before. Unfortunately, I didn't pay attention to it when I accepted the inheritance, Ye Lingxian explained as if she noticed Wei Mengru's gaze. Wei Mengru hesitated for a moment and took out a flower pot from the ring. The flower pot is filled with glaze soil, and in the glaze soil is the snow lotus that looks bright and beautiful. She handed the snow lotus to Ye Lingxian. Ye Lingxian immediately shook his head and said with a smile, "No, it's a bit regretful, but if you really want snow lotus, just go to Mu's house and pick one. Brother Mu won't mind anyway." Her voice suddenly stagnated, and she felt her heart hurt as if it had been stabbed by a needle, and a strong soreness filled her nasal cavity. She took a shallow breath and let it out slowly. Just when she was about to smile, Wei Mengru put a hand on the girl's head, let her bury her face in his arms, and gently stroked her silky hair. "There's no one else here, so it's okay," she whispered into Ye Lingxuan's ear. "I told you I'm fine." Ye Lingxian whispered again. However, under Wei Mengru's comfort, for some reason, the calmness that the Forbidden Area Saint had maintained seemed to be broken, and Wei Mengru soon felt that the collar of her clothes was wet with tears. After a long time, Ye Lingxian wiped away the tears from the corners of her eyes with the back of her hand, and her eyes were red. "Sister Mengru, aren't you sad?" Wei Mengru smiled gently, "Sad? But I don't know why, I just can't cry." She pointed to her chest and whispered, "It seems empty here." In the evening, the sun set. The fairy in the green skirt opened her eyes in front of the throne, and her eyes seemed a little tired. "Senior Kingdi, are you okay?" an elder in the audience couldn't help asking worriedly. "No problem," the fairy in the green skirt shook her head slowly. She was a little weak, on the one hand because she had not absorbed any spiritual energy in the past 2 days, and on the other hand, because she had never passed the tribulation and had been suppressing the arrival of the Yuanshen tribulation. Some people in Yaokai speculated that this was because there was something wrong with Kingdi's body. She forced to speed up the time to condense the cauldron, so her body was backlashed. But in fact, this matter has nothing to do with backlash. The fairy in the green skirt leaned against the throne, quietly waiting for the night to fall. She is a person who can endure loneliness. Before the big fish is hooked, she can wait motionlessly. When night falls, the Holy King City is still very lively. What happened in Yaokai Holy Land in recent days has become the most talked about topic among the cultivators. Now the Forbidden Area has sent people to investigate the Holy King City. Lei Shen and Kunpeng seem to have left, but most people have not left the Holy King City. Now the outside world has become a mess. The major ancient families are investigating their internal problems. They have just been investigated. Now returning to their families will only cause trouble. Moreover, this matter should not be over yet. Many people have such a premonition in their hearts. Yaokai was attacked, and the attackers were the 2 ancient families holding ancestral artifacts. Then the question is, why did these 2 ancient families attack the Yaokai Holy Land? Of course, they plan to gain some benefits from it, and this benefit may involve some major forces. This matter cannot be left unresolved. Of course, some people are afraid of being involved, so they choose to leave the Holy King city at night. At midnight that day, a shadow mixed into the crowd, followed everyone silently and left the Holy King city, and sneered in his heart. To be on the safe side, it did not choose to escape on the night when the Green Emperor left Yaokai, but waited until everyone relaxed today before choosing to leave. Although it is a little regrettable that the Green Emperor finally condensed the Dinglu, it is lucky enough to escape from the hands of the female emperor in the Hedeo realm, and we can't ask for too much. What's more, the little cultivator has a close relationship with the female emperor, and he is suspected to be an enhanced version of the natural furnace. If he is allowed to grow, maybe he will assist one female emperor after another in the future. Besides him, it was also a big worry. At this time, a green light suddenly flashed through the eyes of the strange creature. It was stunned for a moment and subconsciously looked up. In the air, a green lotus bloomed silently, and the green light illuminated the entire sky. Then, a big hand quietly descended, pressing the strange creature to the ground, and the vine surged out almost instantly, binding the creature in it. The strange creature looked up in horror and shouted, "Kingdi! Didn't you leave? Why are you still here?" The figure of the fairy in the green skirt appeared silently in people's vision. She was like the nine heavens' mysterious woman, unattainable, and her beautiful face was extremely calm. Until the real culprit behind the scenes is caught, this seat will not go anywhere. Kingdi announced to the public that he had left, and even took Musian with him to create the illusion of leaving. But no one expected that she would block her own breath and choose to return to Yaokai with Musian. The period of suppressing the arrival of the tribulation in the past 2 days was also waiting for this moment. This strange creature is the descendant of the evil god hiding in the Holy King city. It is a land immortal who has comprehended a trace of Taoism and is also one of the real culprits who participated in the attack on Yaokai this time. The vines bound tighter, feeling the rapid loss of spiritual energy, the strange creature was horrified and whispered something. Boom boom boom. At that moment, thunder roared in the sky. It is rumored that the gods of the southern wilderness are very strange. As long as they are true believers, they can make them come once they call their true names. In the depths of the southern wilderness, the mysterious creature with 8 eyes quietly opened its eyes. Its projection appeared in the sky above the Holy King city almost in an instant, looking down at the earth, and slowly said, "Green Emperor, let it go. You should know that every cultivator who wants to advance to the Hedeo realm will be blocked. This is also a test of heaven. As for the death of your Taoist partner, it was not my intention." Its voice was like thunder, resounding throughout Dongzhou, and also caused many equally strange creatures in the southern wilds to cheer the name of the god. "Save people, or in a few days, I will go to the southern wilds myself," the Green Emperor said calmly. It is said that in the depths of the southern wilds, there is a very special imperial level medicinal material. Even if the residual soul of the living disappears, there is a way to capture some of it and guide it back to the body. If it is combined with the water of reincarnation, the Tiandan phoenix fruit and other things to refine the soul returning pill, there is still a possibility for Musian to recover. The creature stared at a certain frozen boy in the Yaokai Holy Land and slowly said, "Your Taoist partner's spiritual consciousness has disappeared. It can't be saved. It's better to give up." At the same time, in the depths of the southern wilds, another invisible thing opened its eyes silently. "Are you going to declare war on the southern wilds for a little cultivator, Shang Yanfei?" It wants Shang Yanfei to take the initiative to persuade the Green Emperor to stop. At the same time, a golden light quietly illuminated the night, accompanied by a voice that seemed to calm the most anxious heart. "Amitabha." The golden Buddha light almost enveloped the earth at that moment. The Buddha in the western regions. Some old monsters in Dongzhou all recognized the origin of the statue, and their hearts were beating wildly. The power of faith in the western region is quite mysterious. Some monks who set foot in it in the past were inexplicably enlightened and never left the western region again. This also made some monks quite afraid of the western region. Shang donor, please persuade the Green Emperor to release the people. The Buddha spoke slowly and chose to stand on the side of the southern wilderness, while his peaceful eyes were staring at the leader of the Lianji sect in the distance. This is pressure. According to normal logical thinking, the Lianji sect is naturally impossible to come forward for a small monk. In Lianji Peak. In an elegant courtyard, Shang Yanfei silently sipped tea, looked at the silver-haired beauty in front of her, and smiled. How to play, you decide. Lin Ling looked at the chessboard in front of him and said calmly, the chessboard is the southern wilderness. Thunder roared in the sky, and the avenue was moved by Lin Ling's words. Concubine Shang Yan cooperated very well and raised her hand, then gently slapped the chessboard. The chessboard shook slightly. Almost at that moment, the ground of the entire southern wasteland trembled violently. In the southern wasteland, several forbidden beings opened their eyes almost at the same time, awakened by this terrifying breath. The chessboard is also the western region, Lin Ling continued. Concubine Shang Yan, you dare. In the western region, some powerful people were alarmed, shocked, and angry. These powerful people can detect the crisis in advance, and at this moment, even if concubine Shang Yan has not made a move, they have already sensed something. Concubine Shang Yan smiled brightly, guess, do I dare? She slapped the chessboard. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 226. The slap was just a normal slap on the chessboard, but the next moment, a deafening roar suddenly came from the entire western region. Then, the ground began to shake violently. Amidba. At this time, a Buddhist sound slowly resounded in the western region. The Buddhist sound was like thousands of people shouting together, and the sound echoed in the 9 provinces. Then, a golden light shot up into the sky, breaking through the long night. In a certain area of the western region, under the gloomy black clouds, a huge Buddha statue quietly appeared in the field of vision. Followed by the golden light surging like a tide, and the shaking ground also quietly calmed down. In the western region, many Buddhist disciples all raised their heads, looking a little nervous. Although they didn't know what happened, they roughly knew that it seemed that the great power in the western region was fighting with the leader of the Lianji sect in Dongzhou. As for the reason, it is unknown. Shang Yanfei, Lianji sect has never had any friction with the outside world in the past. Your actions this time will push Lianji sect into a place of no return. An evil god slowly spoke in the depths of the southern wilderness. Although Linglong's words are true, it does not mean that there will be no backlash. Do you really intend to use Lianji sect to attack the southern wilderness and the western region at the same time? Another cold and gloomy voice sounded. Although the tone was extremely strong, it was actually giving Shang Yanfei a way out and did not want a real conflict. Linglong's ability is too terrifying. Although she cannot speak frequently due to some kind of constraint, every time she speaks, it will attract the resonance of the great Dao. If she really fights hard, the southern wilderness will suffer great losses. By then, other beings hiding in the darkness may be able to get benefits. Amidba, Mr. Shang, you should think carefully before taking action. It is irrational to use Lianji sect to attack the southern wilderness and the western region. A Buddha slowly spoke. A purple phoenix lotus. Shang Yanfei spoke. As for why we need to find the purple phoenix lotus in the western region, you know better than me. Why did the western region speak up to help the southern wilderness when Dongzhou and the southern wilderness were arguing, and even stand on the side of the southern wilderness? Under normal circumstances, wouldn't it be better for the western region to watch the snipe and clam fight in secret? Just like the other forces that are silent at this moment. But the western region opened its mouth. The only explanation is that the western region was also involved in the obstruction of the Green Emperor this time, and even the western region and the southern wilderness reached some agreements, so they had to come forward. After all, those who want to prevent the Green Emperor from rebirth, are far more than the evil gods in the southern wilderness. In the past, the Green Emperor went to the western region, and it seems that some unpleasant things happened. This time, knowing that the Green Emperor reunited with the Cauldron, the powerful people in the western region naturally did not want the Green Emperor to return to the unity of the Tao. In addition, I also want a portion of the Emperor-level medicinal materials in the southern wilderness. Shang Yanfei spoke again calmly. It is far from enough to ask for medicinal materials from the western region and the southern wasteland at the same time. Relying on the Lianji sect alone is far from enough. Finally, an evil god in the southern wasteland could not help but take action. It stretched out a big hand from the depths of the southern wasteland, covering the sky and the sun, and reached out in the direction of Dongzhou. In Dongzhou, many cultivators were terrified, realizing that this was an evil god in the southern wasteland who refused to give in and was going to take action. However, before the big hand touched, there was a sudden thunder, and then a voice slowly sounded, "The Lianji sect is not enough, what about the restricted area?" In the rolling thunder, a majestic voice resounded throughout the 9 provinces, and before the evil god's big hand touched the edge of Dongzhou, the dark fire burned fiercely at the border of Dongzhou at that moment. Boom! There was a deafening vibration at the border of Dongzhou. The evil god quietly withdrew his hand, seeming a little angry. "Lord of the Forbidden Zone, what does this have to do with your Forbidden Zone?" In a sense, the Forbidden Zone can be said to be a special cave heaven. Even if Dongzhou disappears, the Forbidden Zone still exists. This is one of the reasons why the Forbidden Zone has never intervened in any disputes in Dongzhou in the past. However, the Lord of the Forbidden Zone took action at this time, which is a bit unreasonable. "That cultivator is my daughter's Taoist partner," the Lord of the Forbidden Zone said lightly. "That cultivator? The Taoist partner of the Qing Emperor is also the son-in-law of the Lord of the Forbidden Zone?" Even these old monsters couldn't help but feel a little incredible when they heard this, and even felt it was absurd. With the character of the Lord of the Forbidden Zone, how could he allow his son-in-law to have more than 2 Taoist partners at the same time? But the Lord of the Forbidden Zone also couldn't lie about this. This means, the boy who died unexpectedly may have really boarded the warship of the Forbidden Zone. As the Lord of the Forbidden Zone spoke, the tense atmosphere just now seemed to have calmed down quietly. If it was just the Lianji sect, the western region and the southern wasteland could unite and perhaps persuade concubine Shangyan to retreat, but if the Forbidden Zone, or even the Green Emperor, was added. In the southern wasteland, an evil god slowly spoke, "I can give the southern wasteland's imperial-level medicinal materials to the Lianji section." The evil god paused and continued, "The Lianji sect's Ascension Conference is well known in the 9 provinces, and many cultivators from the 9 provinces participate every year. How about a bet on this Ascension Conference? If Dongzhou wins the Ascension Conference, my southern wasteland medicinal materials will be used as a gift, and I can also send an 8th grade elixir as a reward for the Ascension Conference. If my southern wasteland disciples win the Ascension Conference, you only need to return a portion of the imperial-level medicinal materials to us afterwards. How about that? If we bet on this, the Purple Phoenix Lotus can be handed over to the sect today. What do you think, Mr. Shang?" The great power in the western region also spoke up. "The winner of this Ascension Conference will be given an Emperor-level medicinal material and 2 8th grade elixirs. The 3 parties will each give one. Once such a being in the Hedeo realm takes action, Zhu will be in chaos. 2 Emperor-level medicinal materials are extremely precious to such a great power, but the southern wilderness and the western region are already in the wrong, plus the intervention of the Forbidden Area, and even the existence of the reincarnated Queen, still need to be carefully considered. The great powers from all walks of life have all sensed the breath of the reincarnated Queen. The puppet beside her is also the reincarnated Queen, and is also in the Hedeo realm, which is definitely not to be underestimated. At present, the rebirth of the Green Emperor is a foregone conclusion. In addition, The combination of factors such as the Lianji sect and the forbidden area also makes both parties not want to continue to entangle in this matter. What's more, both the western region and the southern wilderness have considerable confidence in the disciples of their own clan. Concubine Shangyan tapped the table lightly with her knuckles and said calmly, "One thing is another, the bet is fine, but it has nothing to do with this matter." Many people were shocked. They didn't expect the sect leader to be so strong. She meant that she could accept the bet at the Ascension Conference, but this matter would be dealt with separately. "What I want is your apology, not to entangle the two things together." When the voice rang out again, the evil god in the southern wasteland was silent for a long time, and the Buddha of the western regions did not speak either. "There will be a natural disaster in the southern wasteland." Lin Ling opened her lips lightly. As soon as the voice fell, a torrential rain began to fall in the southern wasteland for no reason. At the same time, in the depths of the southern wilds, a god slowly spoke. This incident was indeed caused by some people who had just joined the southern wilds and were ignorant. The imperial-level medicinal materials will be used as an apology. In addition, we will also send people to apologize to the Yaokai Holy Land in person later. If Musian was present, he would probably complain at this moment, "Come on, whatever happened to the classics was done by temporary employees recruited from outside, and it has nothing to do with us." "Amitabha, Zhuang Buddha Lotus, I will hand it over to Mr. Shang today." The great man in the western region also spoke. In fact, the biggest guide of this matter was the first generation of demon emperors, and both the southern wilds and the western regions were just going with the flow. But the southern wilds and the western regions still apologized by default, because they were indeed not right in this matter. But the real reason was the existence of the spirit dragon. If she really spoke, it would cause huge casualties. Neither the western region nor the southern wilds were willing to really take action, which would cause turmoil in Zhuzhou and affect their future practice. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article feed, placement, below article feed, target. Type, mix. Under normal circumstances, Linglong would not interfere with the affairs of the outside world. No one knew why she would help a young cultivator, and even said what she meant several times. No one was willing to continue gambling. Shang Yanfei quietly withdrew her gaze and said calmly, "Since you are all interested in the Ascension Conference just now, I will accompany you to gamble." When this voice sounded, thunder suddenly rumbled, which was the response of the heaven to the three-party bet. The bet between Lianji sect, western region, and southern wilderness. A stone stirred up 1,000 waves. This news made many young cultivators in Dongzhou excited. The geniuses of Zhuzhou gathered in Lianji sect, and will select the strongest among the younger generation in the Ascension Conference. There are many geniuses in Zhuzhou, and no one is willing to give in to anyone, because this is an era of geniuses, and all kinds of powerful physiques basically exist in this era. But what kind of physique can make it to the end of the Ascension Conference is very exciting. Until the three parties took back their magical powers, people in all parts of Zhuzhou were still discussing this topic enthusiastically. And the Lianji sect was more lively than ever before. And in this lively atmosphere, Musian's corpse was also sent back to the Lianji sect that night. Tonight, the Lianji sect was drizzling, and the rain was beating on the ground, as if countless lotus flowers were blooming. I don't know who discovered this first, and almost that night, the news of Musian's death spread throughout the Lianji sect. The fairy in the green skirt slowly pushed open the door of Tianhe garden and walked into the other garden. Beside her, Ye Lingxian and Wei Mengru had no expression on their faces. Although the medicinal herbs in the southern wilderness may be able to piece together the scattered spiritual consciousness and find it again, no one knows whether he can be rescued in the end. Even though they were hopeful, seeing Musian's pale face when he was sealed in the ice sculpture still made Ye Lingxian and others feel a prick of pain in their hearts. "I'll go find Qianer first," Ye Lingxian whispered. Yechian didn't know about this yet. Not only Yechian, but probably most people would not have thought that the three parties had made such a big fuss this time, and even almost started a war, just because of the death of a cultivator in the refining spirit realm. Ye Lingxian walked into the villa where she had lived for the past 6 months, and soon saw her sister Yechian in front of the courtyard. This innocent-looking girl was sitting alone in the courtyard, looking at the misty rain, dangling her feet in boredom, her back looking a little lonely. This scene also stung Ye Lingxuan's heart. This girl with an almost perfect personality and even appearance felt a little guilty and uneasy when facing her sister. Today's Yechian is no longer the little monk in the Qi training realm in the past. The more Qing Emperor's inheritance she accepts, the stronger her strength will be, and now she has reached the level of the second level of God refining. Yechian turned his head and looked over as if he felt something. Then, those big bright eyes flashed with surprise and said, "Sister, are you back?" After saying that, regardless of the drizzle outside, he ran forward and threw himself into Ye Lingxuan's arms. Ye Lingxian had a smile on her face, as if she wanted to maintain her usual indifference, but when she looked at the sunny smile on the face of the girl in her arms, the smile on the face of the forbidden saint slowly faded away. She lowered her eyes slightly, but her formerly magnificent pupils seemed a little dim at the moment. "What's wrong with sister? Is the inheritance not going well?" Yechian also noticed the abnormality and couldn't help but look up at Ye Lingxian, and at the same time glanced at the doll standing quietly beside her. Ye Lingxian opened her mouth slightly, and after a long time, she spoke softly, "The inheritance went smoothly." Yechian tilted her head in confusion and couldn't help but look at the girl in the purple skirt. She asked strangely, "Then why does my sister look unhappy? Even a monk has to keep a good mood. There is too much psychological pressure. Will it affect your practice?" This is what the master said when Yechian said this. He pulled Ye Lingxian to sit in the courtyard and said, "By the way, sister, do you know what happened to the sect master and the other two major forces today?" Ye Lingxian nodded slightly. "Senior Qing Emperor doesn't know what's going on. This incident seems to have been caused by various forces trying to stop Senior Qing Emperor, right?" Yechian said. "The real reason is the work of the first-generation Demon Emperor's men. The southern wilderness and the western regions are secretly adding fuel to the flames." Ye Lingxian paused and continued, "Qing Emperor has returned to the section." Yechian's eyes moved slightly, and he turned to look at his sister, his eyes flashing with joy, and said, "Senior Qingdi is back. Then, Brother Mu should be back too, right?" Ye Lingxuan's expression froze for a moment, but she didn't speak for a long time. Raindrops hit the bluestone road outside the courtyard, and the crackling sound rang in the ears of the sisters. "Sister," Yechian whispered tentatively, peeking at Ye Lingxuan's gloomy expression. "Did you quarrel with Brother Mu?" Under the gaze of Yechian's bright peach blossom eyes, Ye Lingxian bit her lip and subconsciously grasped her sister's little hand. "Brother Mu is dead." Yechian originally wanted to persuade the two to reconcile, and was even thinking about what to say better, but when she heard Ye Lingxuan's answer, she couldn't help but be stunned. It wasn't until a long time later that she stammered, sister, what did you just say?" There was a hint of trembling in that voice. Ye Lingxian bit her lower lip and whispered, "Brother Mu was attacked and killed when he returned to Yaokai. When I found out, his spiritual consciousness had disappeared." Yechian's original innocent smile slowly solidified on his face, his eyes slowly opened wide, and he subconsciously held onto his clothes. "I don't believe it." There was a cry in her voice, and her eyes flashed with crystal light. She supported herself and stood up. "Sister must be lying to me. I want to go to Tianhe Garden to find him." After she finished speaking, she staggered towards the door of Biwen, but as she walked, she slowly stopped. In the past, it only took one stick to go from here to Tianhe Garden to see Museum. The time of fragrance seems to be extremely far away for today's girls. Yechian slowly hugged her knees and languished on the ground, her smooth forehead pressed against her knees. Her beautiful dress was soon wetted by the rain, and water droplets streaked along her cheeks. There seemed to be tears shining in the dimness. Lingxian opened the oil paper umbrella, quietly came to her sister's side, squatted down, put her arms around Yechian's shoulders, and leaned her face on her shoulders, seeming to comfort her sister, and also seemed to want to find someone herself. Rely on. Master seems very sad, do you need me to do anything? The puppet next to him asked. This is a woman with a beautiful face. Her appearance looks no different from that of a normal woman. Although she keeps her aura to herself, part of the reason why the Western Region and Southern Wilderness Association agreed to concubine Shangyan's conditions was because of this doll. No need now, Lingxian said softly. You mean, there will be needs later? The puppet asked. Lingxian raised her head and looked at the rain falling in the dark night, feeling Yechian's slightly trembling body, and gently stroked her sister's hair that was wet by the rain. If Brother Mu's spiritual consciousness really cannot be found in the end, she turned her head and looked at the doll. The stability of Kyushu has nothing to do with me. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 227. Late at night. Lianji Peak. Today's dialogue between the three parties has caused a sensation in Zhuzhou. Tonight, both the outside world and the sect are talking about this matter. Shang Yanfei sat alone under the pavilion drinking tea. Linglong had left not long ago. It seemed that he had noticed that the Green Emperor had returned to Tianhe Garden with Musian, so he hurried to see what was happening with his imperial kitchen. At this time, Shang Yanfei seemed to have sensed something and looked up not far ahead. A woman in a moon-white dress quietly appeared in the field of vision. Lan Murian was as cold and noble as usual. If you don't look at the mean breasts and slender waist, this woman is like a spotless lotus, holy and incomparable. Is the training over? Shang Yanfei asked. Lan Murian nodded gently, then hesitated for a while and looked at the master twice more. Do you want to ask me about tonight? Shang Yanfei asked. Lan Murian nodded slightly. Today, both the Western region and the Southern Wilderness paid a large gift as an apology, but most people are still guessing the reason, and there is no definite number until now. Is the attack on the Green Emperor related to the Western region and the Southern Wilderness? Lan Murian asked. They probably noticed the actions of the first generation of demon emperors in secret, so they added fuel to the fire. The real mastermind behind the scenes is still in the pilgrimage hall. Shang Yanfei poured a cup of tea and placed it on the table. In fact, this is not surprising, because no one would want another female emperor in the Hedeo realm. If the person who passed the tribulation today was from other states, he would also be blocked. It's not that the Green Emperor is more special, but that everyone in the Hedeo realm is like this. Isn't the first generation of Demon Emperor sealed by the Green Emperor? Lan Murian stared at the young and mature female leader who could put her chest on the table. The seal left by the Green Emperor has been thousands of years old, and with some rats doing some tricks in secret, it's not surprising that the seal will decline. Shang Yanfei said. Lan Murian was silent. The strong men in the Hedeo realm were the strongest geniuses in a certain past life. It is impossible to say that they have no ability at all. The strength of the first generation of demon kings is definitely beyond the imagination of most cultivators, but he was not very lucky and happened to meet the Green Emperor. Once the pure world Green Lotus appeared, any strong man in the Hedeo realm would lose his temper. No matter how strong he was, he would be suppressed by it. Although the Green Emperor almost died with the first generation of demon kings because of this, even his spiritual consciousness was almost wiped out. Master, are you sure about this bet? Lan Murian suddenly asked. This bet made many cultivators in Dongzhou excited and a little worried. The apology from the western region and the southern wilderness this time certainly boosted morale, but if they lost the subsequent Ascension Conference. In fact, it doesn't matter if you have to say it. For those powerful people, this is just a small fight among the younger generation. There is an Ascension Conference every few years, and it is impossible for the Lianji sect to win every time. Moreover, there are so many talented people in Zhuzhou, and the final winner may not necessarily be Nanhuang or Ziu, but may be won by a genius from another state. Can't lose, however, Shang Yanfei just answered lightly. As long as Musian is there, it is impossible to lose. Even if he doesn't take action, the top few places in the Ascension Conference are already doomed. Lan Mulian glanced at Shang Yanfei silently, stopped asking questions, and drank a sip of tea silently. In the 9 peaks of Lianji sect, each leader has a different path, and Shang Yanfei has walked these paths in the past. This master is proficient in deducing the secrets of heaven, formations, etc., and I think this sect master also knows what will happen in the future. Is Senior Linglong speaking for Qingdi this time? Lan Mulian suddenly asked. In the impression of the senior sister, Linglong is indifferent by nature and is not interested in most things in the outside world. It stands to reason that he should not speak for Qingdi. If I have to say, Qingdi is a reason, but Musian is the main reason, Shang Yanfei said. Hearing the news of the junior brother who had left the sect for a while, Lan Murian seemed to have a little more doubts, and whispered, "What does this have to do with the pastor brother? He was attacked and died in Yaokai, and the herbs requested this time were taken for him." Lan Murian was stunned for a moment, and she didn't hear what Shang Yanfei said afterwards, but her expression under the veil slowly solidified, staring at her master blankly. Raindrops fell on the ground, and water droplets outside the courtyard splashed, wetting the ground. "His body has been sent back to Tianhe Garden," Shang Yanfei reminded vaguely, until she saw the figure of the cold white dress beauty turning around and leaving. Shang Yanfei retracted her sight quietly, and then sat alone in the pavilion under the rain curtain, leisurely drinking tea. Then, she suddenly smiled. "Really welcome." She raised her fingertips and blew out a wisp of spiritual energy. The spiritual energy turned into a paper crane, flapping its wings and flying towards Tianhe Garden. The elixir in the paper crane seemed to shine with a charming luster in the darkness. Tianhe Garden. Musian felt the coldness coming from his body, and subconsciously wanted to say several times, "Can you quickly unfreeze this ice for me? I'm freezing to death." At this moment, Musian's consciousness was in a clear state, and Qingdi had previously held the illusion that Musian's consciousness was still in his body. When freezing his body, he froze his consciousness together with his body. So now Musian could feel the biting cold coming continuously, making him shiver. Of course, despite the coldness, Musian was actually very moved. After all, this time he knew that the girls around him cared about him. Bairuoxi covered her face and sobbed softly. Yelingxian also brought Yeqian to the villa. Compared with her sister, Yeqian was not good at concealing her inner sadness. At this time, the eye circles were red, and he was desperately wiping away tears. It was Miss Linglong's sad singing of AAA that made Musian feel a little weird, because it really ruined the atmosphere a bit too much. Everyone was crying, but she sounded like she was singing. Fairy Kinkan raised her hand and threw the evil god who was bound by Wu Hua in front of Tianhe Garden. The evil god looked extremely strange. He did not look like a human being, but looked like various creatures put together. At this time, he screamed angrily, "Qing Emperor, let me go. The one who attacked your little boyfriend was not me but the first-generation demon emperor. I am just following the trend. Let me go, and I can guarantee that Nanhuang will give you other 8th-grade elixirs in the future." Its voice was urgent and angry, and its desire to survive seemed to be overflowing. After finally comprehending a trace of Taoism when returning to the Void Realm, it is very likely that in the future it will become the Southern Wilderness. No. even the first land immortal to enlighten the Tao in the entire Kyushu. However, at this moment, his fate is being controlled by others, which naturally makes people unwilling to accept it. Previously, the evil god deep in the southern wilderness had not asked Qing Emperor to release him, which indirectly meant that he had given up on him. Fairy Kinkan glanced at him coldly but did not speak. Bairuoxi suddenly asked softly, "Is he one of the masterminds behind the scenes?" Fairy Kinkan nodded silently. If anything, this evil god is the mastermind behind the scenes, but the real person behind it is the first-generation demon emperor. The seals in the pilgrimage hall are slowly being eroded. Even if a being like the first-generation demon emperor cannot escape from the pilgrimage hall, it is not surprising that he can use the corroded seals to make some small movements in the outside world. Ye Lingxian looked at the creature calmly. His shape is particularly ferocious and terrifying. Just seeing it for the first time makes people feel as if they have seen the most fearful thing deep in their hearts, which makes people shudder. However, Ye Lingxuan's gaze remained unchanged from beginning to end. There were still tears in those peach blossom eyes, but hidden deep in those eyes was a hint of deep coldness. From Ye Lingxuan's cuff, a golden chain came out silently. Lock of desolate time. The evil god raised his head in fear and stared at the condescending girl. "Are you a forbidden saint?" Ye Lingxian did not answer, but the lock of desolate time in his cuffs quietly turned into a sharp blade and wrapped around the creature's body. "Does the restricted area plan to become an enemy of Nanhuang?" the evil god said angrily. He realized that something was wrong. His current body was in very bad shape because the Qing Emperor's vines were constantly absorbing his spiritual energy. If he was bound by the locks of desolate time, the consequences would be disastrous. The locks of desolate time are binding silently, and the body of the strange creature is aging rapidly. For Ye Lingxian and others, it may only be the time of a stick of incense, but for this creature, it may have already changed the world. However, Ye Lingxian ignored it, and the lock of desolate time tightened. In the end, the body of the strange creature sealed by the Qing Emperor quietly turned into dust and scattered in the hall, leaving only Ye Lingxuan's cold body. The sound echoed in the hall. "Let them come." The lock of desolate time silently returned to Ye Lingxuan's cuffs. "Sister Lingxian is so sassy, you can't tell her at all." Musian sighed inwardly in the ice coffin. Although it was a pity that he couldn't see Ye Lingxuan's current expression, just by hearing the voice just now, he could roughly imagine Ye Lingxuan's expression. Later, when he heard the crying that lasted for a long time and gradually turned into choked sobs, Musian was deeply moved, thinking that Qing Emperor and Miss Lin Ling should soon realize that his spiritual consciousness was still there. It's about the body. After all, 3 full days have passed. The turtle breath pill has wrapped his spiritual consciousness, and now the pill has cracked. With beings of the level of Qing Emperor and Lin Ling, it should be possible soon. Noticed. After another half an hour, the leaders of Dao Peak, Kanghai Peak, and even Mujian's master came to Tianhe Garden to pay homage to the sect disciple. The atmosphere in the hall seemed a bit heavy and sad. For those who do not know the truth at present, they naturally think that the current situation is not optimistic. Even if they obtain the soul-returning pill, they may not be able to save Musian unless his spiritual consciousness can be pieced back together. But how difficult it is, these leaders all know in their hearts. Unknowingly, more and more people gathered in the hall. The sect disciples who had been helped by Musian in the past, Huang Manting and others also came to Tianhe Garden one by one to visit this deceased friend. "Sister." At this time, Musian suddenly heard someone shouting. Immediately afterwards, voices came one after another in the hall, and Lan Mulian and his sister Lan Feiying also arrived. The faces of these two sisters didn't look very good. Lan Mulian stared at the frozen boy and his extremely pale face, seeming to recall the lively Musian in the past, and couldn't bear to lower his eyes. "It seems that almost all the great white sharks have come. The only one who hasn't come is the sect master?" But it's true. If she comes, it will cause a big commotion. And that woman is a little too mysterious. Maybe she knows that I'm not dead yet, Musian thought to himself. Among the people he knows, the sect master's sister is always the one he can't figure out. Firstly, it's because they have little contact with each other. Secondly, the sect master seems to know how to deduce the secrets of heaven. It is very likely that he knows that he is still alive. Otherwise, he would not ask the western region and the southern wilderness for imperial medicinal materials to reshape his body. Unknowingly, my fish pond has expanded to this extent. Musian listened to the voices outside and felt quite emotional and relieved. Not long after that, those sect disciples left one after another, leaving only a few chiefs and a few talented girls. At this time, Musian suddenly heard the sound of someone approaching him, and then Ye Lingxian said, "Qian, what are you going to do?" Ye Qian slowly squatted down, took out a peach blossom and a snow lotus from the ring, and placed them beside the ice sculpture. "These are the peach blossoms and snow lotus that Brother Mu gave me in the past. He said that peach blossoms and snow lotus are very similar to me. I know he was just lying to me, but I am still very happy. At that time, Brother Mu also promised me to take me to the pilgrimage temple to see peach blossoms, but in the end..." Ye Qian began to sob softly at the end, and tears seemed to flash in her eyes. Lan Murian stared at this scene, walked forward silently, and also took out a peach blossom and a snow lotus, and placed them next to Musian's ice coffin. I still remember that he told me that the reason why he said that Miss Bai was most suitable for Snow Lotus was that he didn't want to hurt her heart. Lan Murian sighed faintly. "Pastor brother, you are indeed a thoughtful person." Bai Ruoxi was stunned for a moment. After an unknown amount of time, she smiled silently. "So Mu Lang was just trying to make me happy." In fact, she knew it in her heart, but she just didn't think much about it. Bai Ruoxi stepped forward silently, took out a snow lotus, and placed it next to Musian's ice coffin. Wei Mengru was silent, and also took a snow lotus from the ring and placed it next to Musian. For a moment, there were several snow lotuses and peach blossoms around Musian. Although Musian didn't know what they had done, for some reason, he began to feel a little bad in his heart at this moment. "Did you all receive the snow lotus he sent?" the fairy in the green skirt couldn't help but ask in a low voice. Ye Qian rubbed her red eyes, wiped away the tears from the corners of her eyes, and said, "Everyone received it when we were in Tianqian City. Go to the pilgrimage temple to see the peach blossoms, he told me about it in the past," Lan Mulian said softly. "Brother Mu took me to see it," Ye Lingxian also said in a low voice. "Mu Lang took me there later." The voices in the hall suddenly fell silent. And Musian's heartbeat accelerated uncontrollably, as if it might jump out of his throat at any time, and the sense of comfort just now disappeared. AAA. In this sad atmosphere, a slightly inappropriate song suddenly came. Lin Ling was originally so sad that she couldn't even eat the meat buns, but at this moment, her eyes seemed to gradually light up, and she walked quickly towards Musian's ice coffin. "Senior Ling Long." Ye Lingxian and others didn't know what happened to Ling Long suddenly, and couldn't help but whispered. "The ice sculpture will melt at this moment." Lin Ling's pleasant voice rang in the hall, and when everyone was still at a loss, the fairy in the green skirt also noticed the abnormality, and her originally dark eyes quietly had a glimmer of light. "He's still alive." As this voice rang out, the atmosphere in the hall couldn't help but stagnate, and then several eyes looked at the gradually melting ice sculpture. "He is indeed still alive. I sensed his consciousness," Yan Ruyu said immediately, her tone unable to conceal her excitement. The Daofeng chief, Ying Guhuan, Yu Suanji, and others beside her also had their eyes slightly bright, staring at the melting ice sculpture. Swish. As the ice sculpture melted, mist rose up. Crack. The turtle breath pill in Musian's body made dense cracking sounds one after another. Fairy Kinkan seemed to have sensed something, staring at him closely, and said, "Turtle breath pill." Ya Lingxian was slightly stunned, and then a glimmer of light appeared in her eyes. No wonder Brother Mu is still alive. He may have eaten the turtle breath pill before he died, which saved his consciousness. Bairuoxi's eyes also lit up a little, staring at Musian with expectation. The chiefs never spoke, but just stared at the boy under the ice sculpture. Lan Feiying grabbed her sister's wrist, looking at the boy in the ice coffin nervously and expectantly. The sound of shattering rang out clearly in the silent hall, until finally, the turtle breathing pill finally shattered completely. Under several expectant gazes, Musian suddenly opened his eyes. At this moment, many people in the hall felt relieved, and then, more unexpected surprises surged in their hearts. He is still alive. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 228. It was late at night outside the house. Musian was lying in the ice coffin, with several snow lotus and 3 peach blossoms placed beside him. The snow lotus was given by Musian from Tianqian City to the girls around him to please them. The peach blossoms were given to Bairuoxi, Yeqian, and Lan Mulian. The hall was strangely quiet. "Brother Mu, you are really still alive," Yeqian cried with joy and finally reacted. She immediately stepped forward and hugged his neck, with a crystal light flashing in the corners of her eyes. Lan Mulian, who had always remained calm, relaxed a little. The heavy mood that had been heavy since she entered Tianhewan seemed to be relieved a lot. Although her cold face was hidden under the gauze, her eyes could still show her joy. Lan Feiying held her sister's arm tightly, feeling both nervous and happy. She didn't know whether this big boy was faking his corpse or really reborn from the dead. Ya Lingxian was also overjoyed. From the time Musian died to now when he opened his eyes from the coffin, this huge contrast made the eyes of this girl who always showed her mature side in front of outsiders feel hot, but she still bit her lips lightly and tried to hold back her tears. Yan Ruyu stared at Musian with a little more relief in her eyes, and whispered, "It's good to be alive." Bairuoxi cried bitterly, but her eyes never moved away from Musian, fearing that this was just an illusion she saw. This girl used to have nothing to say in the family, and she had no sense of security. Later, Musian almost occupied a large part of her heart. One day, she suddenly knew that he was dead, and her heart suddenly felt empty. At this moment, seeing him come back to life, she was overjoyed, and her emotions naturally could not be suppressed any longer. Wei Mengru always stared at her young master, never moving her eyes away. Compared to others, her reaction was the calmest. She just looked at Lin Ling, who was squatting in front of Musian with her knees hugged, curiously poking his face, and then smiled silently. After a brief surprise, the fairy in the green skirt looked at Musian softly and said, "Your spiritual consciousness has not yet healed, and you need to recuperate for a while." The former Qing emperor had a similar experience to Musian, but her situation was much more serious at that time, and her spiritual consciousness was almost wiped out. In the end, she was recuperated with the help of Musian's natural furnace, and later, with the help of the reincarnation water and the Tiandan phoenix fruit, she recondensed the furnace. Those powerful people who spoke today probably would not have thought that the reason why this peerless empress was able to be reborn was with the help of a cultivator in the realm of refining spirits. Is Brother Mu's injury not completely healed yet? Yeqian gradually calmed down after the surprise, raised her head and looked at Musian with a pair of watery peach blossom eyes. She could sense that the cauldron in Musian's body was a little empty at this time, and his body looked extremely weak. Musian shook his head and smiled, "It's okay, as long as the spiritual consciousness is nurtured, the injuries of the body can be slowly repaired." Yeqian felt a little relieved after hearing this. The green skirt fairy next to her quickly had a little more doubt in her eyes, and whispered, "Did you take the turtle breath pill before, so you saved a wisp of spiritual consciousness?" Musian nodded gently, "The turtle breath pill that Sister Lingxian gave me that day saved my life. Under normal circumstances, A cultivator in the realm of refining spirits has his own spiritual consciousness. The spiritual consciousness is indestructible, and even if the body is destroyed, it can be slowly healed and reborn. However, once the enemy attacks, it will inevitably destroy the spiritual consciousness. Musian's spiritual consciousness is not detected by others. According to his own guess, it may be because of the turtle breath pill, and secondly, it may be related to the last title in his current status bar. Heavenly Blessing. I don't know which protagonist this title is, and when it appeared in his status bar. Musian hugged Yechian and stroked her hair while looking at the people in front of him, with a bit of emotion after escaping from a desperate situation in his eyes. He was lucky to survive this time because he was a gigolo. Otherwise, he would probably be dead now. Although the turtle breath pill given by Ye Lingxian was not of high grade, it required an emperor-level medicinal material to refine it. No wonder there were only 1 or 2 in the forbidden area. Except for Ye Lingxian, no one else would have such treatment, to be able to carry a turtle breath pill that could save their lives at a critical moment. Emperor-level medicinal materials are natural treasures that can only grow 1 or 2 plants every 10,000 years. Even in a forbidden area with a strong foundation, there may only be 2 or 3 plants. This time, the western region and the southern wilderness each provided an emperor-level medicinal material to heal Musian's injuries. For the 2 states, it was no less than cutting meat from them. The southern wasteland and the western regions are not like the eastern continent. The conditions for the growth of medicinal materials are much more stringent. There may be only 4 or 5 imperial-level medicinal materials in the entire southern wasteland, not to mention that concubine Shangyan also specified a certain imperial-level medicinal material. Using these 2 imperial-level medicinal materials to refine the soul-returning pill, you may be able to feel a trace of Tao rhyme from it later, and you may comprehend the Tao in advance. The bet proposed by the southern wasteland and the western regions at the end is actually different from apology, but just wanting a step. Apology is apology, but because of unwillingness, the bet was proposed to save face. After all, it takes too long to produce an imperial-level medicinal material. It takes 10,000 years to produce an imperial-level medicinal material, and in these 10,000 years, even a strong person in the Hedeo realm may die if he is not careful. But they are in the wrong in this matter. Even if they only discovered the actions of the first generation of demon kings and secretly fanned the flames, they are still involved. Even if they are dissatisfied now, they can only swallow their anger. But it will be a very long process to cultivate new imperial-level medicinal materials after this. If I can really comprehend the Tao in the end, the soul-returning pill made from 2 imperial-level medicinal materials should be at least half stronger than it is now. When thinking of this, Musian couldn't help but feel a little more expectant in his heart. Although he always felt that even if he comprehended the Tao, he would most likely be robbed by the natural furnace. Musian was thinking about such things. At this moment, he suddenly felt that the girl in his arms twisted her waist slightly, and her pretty face flushed cutely, and she secretly broke away from Musian's arms. After the joy, the girl suddenly realized that so many people were staring at her, and the shame in her heart suddenly surged up in her heart, so that she couldn't help but quietly move her eyes away. Chiener was still shy as always, and was not good at hiding her emotions. Musian smiled knowingly, then supported himself, stood up from the ice coffin, and stepped out of the ice coffin. When he looked up at the people in front of him, he saw that Yan Ruyu and others were looking at him with great satisfaction, and each of the chiefs had the care and sincerity of an elder for the younger generation in their eyes. It must be said that although Musian seemed a little weak after his rebirth, this weakness, coupled with the perfect facial lines, and even the temperament of a noble man, suddenly made the older women have a little more desire to protect him. Musian soon noticed Lan Murian's gaze again, and looked over. This cold and noble senior sister withdrew her gaze as if she was electrocuted and avoided his gaze. Senior sister actually has this side. This wave of coffins is not in vain. Musian grinned and looked at Lan Feiying, the younger sister next to Lan Murian, who was wearing a red cheongsam and outlined a graceful and sexy figure. Compared with the reserved Lan Murian, Lan Feiying seemed to be generous, and her charming eyes stared at him slowly. The atmosphere in the hall seemed particularly warm, and the sadness just now disappeared in an instant, becoming much more relaxed. This time, Musian can be regarded as a blessing in disguise. Emperor-level medicinal materials, even those geniuses in those ancient families can't get them. In the final analysis, even the strong men in the Hedeo realm are reluctant to use them easily. Because, Emperor-level medicinal materials cannot be grown by cultivation alone, but more depends on luck. Generally speaking, even if a medicinal material is carefully cultivated and cared for, it is not easy to survive for 2,000 years. Another 3,000 years, or even 10,000 years, is a gamble. Bet that this herb can live for 10,000 years and become an imperial-level herb. However, this is too difficult. Most herbs are usually refined before they reach 10,000 years. Mu Lang, are you really okay? A gentle and soft voice came from the side. Bai Ruoxi was wearing a white dress with beautiful plum blossoms embroidered on it. She stared at Musian's peach blossom eyes with moist and pitiful eyes. Musian looked up at Miss Bai. His eyes stayed for a long time under her concerned and worried eyes. Feeling the love in the eyes of the beauty, his heart was warmed. Then, he smiled gently and said, "Just wait until your body is well, there is no big problem. It's a pity that he still needs to wait for the soul-nourishing pill to be refined, otherwise he can feel the warmth of Miss Bai tonight. But it doesn't matter. Anyway, there is still a lot of time in the future. After refining the soul-returning pill and repairing the body, the killer whale cub in the pond can be cultivated again. Sister Lingxuan's inheritance seems to be not over yet, but she can receive the inheritance in Lianji sect in the future, which will also facilitate his future operations. And the senior sister seems to be interested in him. If he strengthens the relationship with Sister Feiying, he may be able to unlock new postures. In addition, Yao Meng's cauldron is now condensed, but it will take some time to absorb the spiritual energy. During this period, he may need his help. When Musian thought of this, he looked at the fairy Yao Meng in front of him, wearing a green skirt and moonlight covering her body. At this time, Yechien's soft voice suddenly came from behind, "By the way, do you still want your flowers?" The seemingly soft and pleasant voice made Musian's thoughts suddenly interrupted, and also pulled him back to reality from the warmth just now. The previously seemingly harmonious atmosphere suddenly stagnated. Then, the eyes of several people all looked at the snow lotus and peach blossoms in the ice coffin vaguely. Just now, because they were worried about Musian, no one thought about Suolian and Ahua. However, Yechien's words at this moment made everyone present gradually active. Wei Mengru stared at her young master quietly in the crowd, with a slight raise of her lips, outlining a very beautiful arc. In the past, she had persuaded her young master because of his indecision, and at that time he confidently said that there would be no problem with his operation. What about now? So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 229. It would have been fine if Yechien hadn't said this, but once this was mentioned, the girls all subconsciously looked at the snow lotus and peach blossoms beside the ice coffin. Bai Ruoxi frowned slightly, her eyes deep. Lan Murian's eyes seemed calm, but her cold face under the veil was like frost. Lan Feiying looked indifferent, with a smile in her eyes, standing beside the yellow-skirted maid Wei Mengru, watching the show with her. Lin Ling was thinking about the meat buns on the table, her pair of transparent red eyes blinked, looking at the few people, and took a bite of a meat bun on the table. She was relieved to know that Musian was still alive, so she ate more fragrantly than before. The heads looked at each other and saw a hint of strangeness in each other's eyes. Although it was known that this disciple who had just joined the sect for less than half a year had many girls around him, But one person operated multiple lines at the same time and gave so many girls gifts at the same time. This operation, even these leaders had never seen it before. Originally, everyone was in the sadness brought by Musian's death, but Yechien's words suddenly wiped out the cheerful atmosphere at the scene. At this moment, their eyes fell on the snow lotus and peach blossoms in front of the ice coffin. Yalingxian stepped forward silently, picked up her withered snow lotus, glanced at Musian again, and said softly, "Brother Mu is really good to Chiener. He not only gave her snow lotus, but also peach blossoms." Yalingxian has always felt guilty about her sister. After all, she said that she would keep her sister away from Musian, but it turned out that after persuading her for a long time, her sister did not stay away, but she also got herself involved. Moreover, she secretly got intimate with her sister's beloved without her sister's knowledge. Yalingxian had always wanted to secretly match Yechian and Musian. However, seeing Yechian receive the peach blossoms from Musian, she felt very complicated. She had never received peach blossoms from Brother Mu, but Chiener had. Just thinking about it made Yalingxian a little sad. Girls are selfish, especially girls of Yalingxuan's age. On the one hand, they care about their sister and hope that their sister will live well, but on the other hand, they also hope that they can also receive gifts from their favorite people. Even if it is just a peach blossom picked from the pilgrimage temple, it will also make people happy. Mu Lang once said when we were practicing dual cultivation before that he picked this peach blossom specially for me in the pilgrimage temple. Bairuoxi stared at Musian's profile, his eyes full of affection and tenderness. Mu Lang is just trying to make me happy. If it were a normal person, he would probably panic when he saw this scene. But as an outstanding fish pond owner, at least Musian can still maintain his calmness on the surface. He actually didn't expect this situation. Or rather, he thought of this scene, but didn't expect that this day would come so soon. Originally, according to expectations, he should wait until the feelings of several girls are almost the same, and then test their thoughts. However, this time he accidentally came back to life, and everyone came to pay tribute to him, and the result became like this. However, Musian was not panicked. After all, the ice coffin was right next to him, and at worst he could just lie back down. But with the personalities of these girls, they probably wouldn't really do anything too extreme to him. Well, at most, it's the heart lock, the wild time lock, and the vines of the Green Emperor. With Bairuoxi's simple question, the atmosphere on the scene suddenly became silent, like the calm before the storm. Let's see if the maid sister is going to help me out first. When Musian thought of this, he glanced at the nearby side. Wei Mengru and Lan Feiying were watching the show on the side. Miss Lin Ling even sat on a chair and ate a meat bun silently, looking at this place with a pair of clear red eyes, as if it had nothing to do with her. Very good, it can be seen from this that Sister Mengru did not intend to save me this time. When Musian saw the playful look in Wei Mengru's eyes, he understood something. Then he could only defeat them one by one. When Musian thought of this, he said, "Ruoxi." However, as soon as he opened his mouth, his brain made a buzzing sound, and his thoughts suddenly stopped. The whole person seemed to be spinning, his body softened, and he stumbled and almost fell to the ground. Lan Murian reacted very quickly and immediately raised his hand to support him. Mu Lang. Brother Mu. Wei Mengru also stepped forward. Obviously, she still looked like she was watching a good show, but at this moment, the maid's eyes, which were usually cold, had a little more concern. Lan Feiying stared at the pale-looking boy and said, "There seems to be something wrong with his spiritual consciousness. It's not that there is a problem, but he only has a trace of spiritual consciousness now, so it is difficult to repair the damage to his body." Lan Mulian noticed the abnormality and spoke. "Don't give him too much stimulation for the time being, let him recover well." At this time, the fairy in green skirt who had been silent all the time finally spoke at the right time. She was wrapped in a thin green skirt with a tight and sexy body, fairy skin, and jade bones, and her transparent green eyes were calm. She said, "Leave him to me for the time being. I will nurture his spiritual consciousness in the next 2 days until the soul-returning pill is refined. If there is no accident in the southern wasteland and the western region, a powerful man will send an emperor-level medicinal plant before tomorrow morning, and by that time, there will be an alchemy master in the sect to refine the elixir. Take the soul-nourishing pill given by the Demon King together, and your spiritual consciousness will be warm and nourished soon." During this period, she will also use spiritual energy to help Musian warm and nourish his spiritual consciousness. Out of concern for Musian, the few people didn't think much and nodded lightly. Lin Ling's bright red eyes reflected Musian's figure, and she was so worried that she couldn't even eat the meat buns. She still has a good impression of Musian, because the chef always cooks for her without asking for anything in return, and he is a very good person. Fairy Kinkan saw off the leaders, and before leaving, Yechian couldn't help but turn around and said, "Master, Brother Mu, I'll leave it to you." Fairy Kinkan nodded slightly and showed a beautiful smile, "Don't worry. I'll take good care of him." Ye Lingxian frowned slightly and looked deeply at the Empress. For some reason, she always felt a strange feeling in her heart. Among the people present, only Ye Lingxian knew what had happened between Fairy Kinkan and Musian. Handing Brother Mu over to her, always made people a little uneasy. However, for now, we can only believe Kingdi. At least, given her relationship with Brother Mu, she should be able to find ways to warm up his spiritual consciousness. After seeing everyone off, Fairy Kinkan took Musian into the room. It wasn't that Musian was pretending to be faint just now, but that he was indeed too weak. After all, it is too difficult to support one's body and keep the cauldron running with just a ray of spiritual consciousness. Before spiritual consciousness is completely restored, it is not so easy to move freely. Ye Lingxian actually misunderstood this fairy. She didn't intend to do anything bad to Musian. After all, Musian was so weak now that he couldn't do anything. The fairy in the green skirt was simply trying to warm up Musian's spiritual consciousness at the moment. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. In the past, she stayed in Musian's body and relied on the spiritual energy of the natural furnace to slowly warm her spiritual consciousness. Even later, she absorbed a large amount of the spiritual energy of the natural furnace from Musian. Since I can obtain spiritual energy from Musian, I can naturally give him spiritual energy and nourish his spiritual consciousness. As for the method, although it's a bit disgusting, no one can see it now, so it doesn't matter. The fairy in the green skirt walked to the bed with a hint of affection in her eyes. At this moment, she suddenly felt that there seemed to be a paper crane staying outside the window, and she turned her head slightly to look. On the paper crane, there is also a pill, which seems to shine with a charming luster. "Nirvana pill." Fairy Kinkan's eyes flashed slightly and she said softly. "The conditions for using this Nirvana pill are very strict, and only the dead can use it. The so-called dead does not mean real death, but the spiritual consciousness is still there, but the physical body dies. Its function is actually very simple, that is, it is completely transformed. Musian's current physical condition is actually the same as that of death. Just now, he was just relying on that ray of spiritual consciousness to support his physical activities. Concubine Shangyan has even prepared this. The Nirvana pill is an 8th grade pill, and such pills require at least one emperor grade medicinal plant. To do this for a sect disciple is not something that woman would do. Now is not the time to think about this." Fairy Kinkan muttered to herself, walked to the windowsill, and took out the fiery red pill with red lines, like a phoenix reborn. Then, he turned his head slightly and looked at the sleeping young man behind him. She came to the bed and sat down with her legs turned. Her skin was crystal white and she took off the clothes in front of her shoulders. He picked up the elixir with his green jade fingers and held it in his mouth. He stared at Musian's handsome face with clear lines and slowly lowered his head. "Sister, are you worried about something?" After Yeqian returned to Biwen with Ye Lingxian, he noticed that his sister seemed worried and couldn't help but turn to look at her and asked. Ye Lingxian came back to her senses, smiled slightly, and said, "It's okay, I'm just thinking about some trivial things." Yeqian said, "Oh." After learning that Musian was still alive, this innocent girl felt much better. "By the way, sister, when do you plan to start your inheritance?" Yeqian suddenly asked. Because of Musian's death, Ye Lingxian left the ancestral land early just after receiving half of the inheritance. However, her inheritance was different from others in that it was carried out through puppets. As long as the puppets were around, she could start at any time. Ye Lingxian pondered for a moment and said, "Let's wait until the soul returning pill is refined." At least he had to see Brother Mu recover before he could retreat with peace of mind. "Does sister also plan to participate in the Immortal Ascension Conference?" Yeqian asked. Geniuses from 9 states gathered in this Immortal Ascension Conference, and the final winner will receive 3 rewards, including imperial medicinal materials. Such a reward, let alone those genius disciples, even the land gods in the Return to Void realm would be excited. No. It can even be said that some genius disciples participated in the Immortal Ascension Conference just for the sake of the old monsters in their clan. The old monsters in seclusion in the ancient family may be dying, and a portion of the imperial level medicinal material can allow the cultivator to live another 5,000 years. 5,000 years, even if you can't enter the realm of enlightenment, is enough to live another life. Perhaps in the next life, the rules of heaven and earth will change again, and the way of heaven will allow the land immortals in the Return to Void realm to comprehend the avenue and advance to the realm of enlightenment. I will participate in the Immortal Ascension Conference, just treat it as a trial. Ye Lingxian nodded slightly. This time, the South Wilderness and the Western region secretly made trouble. Even if they were not the leaders of the conspiracy, they played a role in fueling the flames. It can be said that they are one of the culprits who caused Musian's death. Even if both sides gave each other an imperial-level medicinal material, with Ye Lingxian's personality, it is naturally impossible to be satisfied. For this imperial-level medicinal material, the South Wilderness and the Western region will definitely let a very powerful genius participate. This Immortal Ascension Conference will probably be very difficult, Yeqian said worriedly. Ye Lingxian held an umbrella, her exquisite embroidered shoe stepped on the bluestone floor wet by the rain, and said calmly, "Let them come. When the time comes, we will solve it together." Yeqian looked at her sister infatuatedly, her eyes full of admiration. Ye Lingxian naturally noticed the admiration in her sister's eyes, pursed her lips, and maintained the calmness and indifference that a sister should have. Yeqian stared for a while, and suddenly said, "It would be great if sister could be so handsome when she was with Brother Mu." Ye Lingxian. "What are you talking about?" She couldn't help but glare at her sister. "That's right, I happened to pass by several times and saw sister being bullied by Brother Mu." When Yeqian said this, her eyes sparkled. "That's just because Just because sister is shy when facing Brother Mu?" Yeqian asked. Ye Lingxian was anxious, gently patted her sister's shoulder, and then pretended to pinch her face. "Ah, don't." Yeqian smiled and escaped from the umbrella to avoid her sister's chasing. The 2 sisters chased and played in the garden, neither of them using spiritual energy, until they were exhausted and panting slightly before stopping. At the same time, the other side was also panting slightly. Musian felt like he had a dream. He dreamed that he seemed to fall into an abyss, and he was falling continuously, and it seemed that he could not see the bottom. He seemed to hear a sweet voice in his ears, and he could also feel that black hair seemed to brush his cheeks, itchy, with a faint fragrance of hair. He opened his eyes in a daze, and seemed to see the figure of the fairy in the green skirt, sweating and messy black hair. Dream. Musian fell asleep again in a daze. 2 days later, in Lianji Peak, a thunder tribulation that shocked Dongzhou resounded through the sect, attracting the attention of cultivators from all walks of life. In Zhuzhou, there were also great powers who quietly opened their eyes and looked solemnly in the direction of Lianji Peak. The soul returning pill was refined. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 230. Elixir Tribulation. From the 5th grade elixir onwards, every elixir refined will encounter an elixir tribulation. In a sense, what kind of elixir an alchemist can refine is linked to the strength of its master. Elixir above the 7th grade requires at least the return to Void Realm to be refined. In the Lianji sect, there are many alchemists, but there are only a few who can refine 7th grade elixirs or even higher. And the person who refined the 8th grade return to soul pill this time is the head of the Daofeng of the Lianji sect, Yu Zian. The vast calamity cloud spread throughout the Daofeng. On this day, people in the Daofeng were discussing this matter everywhere. Look at this calamity cloud, it is at least a 7th grade elixir. When did the master get an imperial level medicinal material, and what kind of elixir did she refine? On this day, many disciples of the Daofeng whispered and discussed secretly. Junior sister Lingxian, do you know the truth? At this time, a senior brother looked at Ye Lingxian who had just arrived at the Daofeng. Hearing this, many senior brothers and sisters also looked at Ye Lingxian. As for the identity and origin of this girl, many people still don't know it, but this does not prevent them from having a good impression of Ye Lingxian. Her appearance is one aspect, and her politeness and reserve in daily life is another major reason. In Daofeng, there are many people who secretly admire Ye Lingxian, some of whom are even female cultivators. Junior sister Lingxian is the most loved by the master in daily life. Maybe this pill is made by her for junior sister, a senior brother guessed with a smile. Ye Lingxian shook her head reservedly and smiled, I don't know the specific situation. After that, she found an excuse to say goodbye to everyone in Daofeng, and then went to the hall. Yu Zian had been waiting in the hall. She was wearing a light Taoist robe and had a beautiful face. There was a bright red cinnabar on her forehead. As if she noticed the two sisters, she opened her eyes and said with a smile. I have never seen you so punctual when I asked you to come to me on weekdays, but you are punctual enough now. It seems that Musian is really important in your hearts. In her tone, there seemed to be some gentleness and teasing of a master to his disciples. Ye Qian was thin-skinned and blushed. She responded in a low voice, I am just worried that Brother Mu's spiritual consciousness will have problems if it is delayed, so. Okay, you don't have to explain to me, you can take this pill to him, Yu Zian said gently. Her voice is very pleasant, and there is a magic that can calm people down no matter how anxious they are. The two sisters who were uneasy because of Musian's affairs these days slowly calmed down under the influence of this voice. Qianer, you stay here first. I have some questions for you, Yu Zian spoke again. Master, what's the matter? Ye Qian asked. Don't worry, it won't take up much of your time. Yu Zian glared at the disciple unhappily. Ye Qian was usually very obedient, but now it was obvious that she wanted to see Musian earlier and was a little reluctant to stay. Ye Qian nodded obediently. Ye Lingxian took the small wooden box that flew slowly from the lotus pond, and then said with a smile, Master, I will go to Tianhe Garden first. After that, she bowed again to thank the master, and then said goodbye to her sister and her master, left Daofeng, and flew to Liulai Palace. Tianhe Garden. Musian had already woken up. He felt that his spiritual consciousness, which was a little thin in the past 2 days, seemed to have been nurtured. Now his whole body is warm and comfortable. I just don't know why, but I feel a little tired. The sun shines obliquely outside the house. In the quiet little garden, flowers, plants, and trees are evergreen all year round. There is a pavilion beside the rippling pond. Musian is sitting in the pavilion, drinking tea made by the maid. Although he died unexpectedly this time, it is not without benefits. Let's not talk about the soul-returning pill. Secondly, it also makes Musian know how to cherish the people around him, and the people around him also treat him much better. For example, this maid would not make tea for him in the past, but after this time, she finally did something that a maid would do, which made Musian a little moved and relieved. The beautiful Biruoxi was sitting not far away, wearing a clean white dress, with a white face, plump lips, and the hair hanging on her face also added a bit of messy and lazy beauty to her. She looked at Musian with doubtful eyes, and then whispered, "Malang's body seems to be weaker than before, but his spiritual consciousness seems to be nurtured. How did Senior Kingdi do it?" Musian shook his head and said, "I was in a coma for 2 days, so I don't know much." As he said that, he looked in the direction of a certain room. Fairy Yao Meng is now in seclusion in that room, seemingly preparing for the upcoming Yuan-Shen tribulation. Biruoxi stared at Musian's handsome profile. After a brief hesitation, his eyebrows relaxed quickly and he said softly, "Anyway, it's good that your body can recover." Musian nodded gently. In fact, he was still very fortunate about this matter. The turtle breath pill wrapped a wisp of his spiritual consciousness. It was understandable that the return to Void Realm cultivator who attacked him at that time did not notice his spiritual consciousness. But the Lord of the Forbidden Zone, and even Kingdi and others, did not notice his spiritual consciousness, which was a bit wrong. It stands to reason that after a cultivator in the refining spirit realm dies, if he wants, his spiritual consciousness can detect it immediately. Could it be that the turtle breath pill can even hide it from Kingdi and others? It is possible, but the probability is very small. Musian has been thinking about it for the past 2 days, and the only word he can think of is one. Reborn. Someone had already guessed that he would die, and before that, they took away the fortune of heaven and earth, renewed his soul for him, and blocked the secrets of heaven, so Kingdi and others did not detect his spiritual consciousness. He didn't know who that person was. But it can basically be determined that it was the girl he knew around him. Because, so far, except for the first 3 initial titles, the rest of the titles he got were obtained because of his intimacy with the protagonists. However, who is this reborn? Musian looked at the personal interface that had just been opened and fell into deep thought. First it was a reborn, and then it was blessed by heaven. Could it be Miss Ling Long? No, she is so cute, she can't hide any bad intentions. If she is a reborn person, she should have been exposed long ago. Brother Mew. At this time, Ya Lingxuan's crisp and pleasant voice suddenly came from the side, and it also brought Musian back to reality. He turned his head to look. Ya Lingxian, who was wearing a purple long skirt, had a round face and a quiet and elegant temperament. She was standing beside him at some point and handed him a delicate small wooden box in her hand. "This is the soul-returning pill. Master asked me to send it." The soul-returning pill, in a sense, has a similar effect to the soul-nourishing pill. The former can restore the original only wisp of spiritual consciousness of others to a complete spiritual consciousness and slowly repair the damaged spiritual consciousness. The latter can speed up the speed of warming and nourishing the spiritual consciousness. With the soul-returning pill, plus the soul-nourishing pill that he got for free from the first generation of the Demon King, Musian's spiritual consciousness will be restored soon. "Thank you for your hard work." Musian smiled gently and took the small wooden box. During the period of Musian's death, the Forbidden Area was born to search for the traitor. Many people were speculating whether the Forbidden Area would make any big moves, but in fact, the Forbidden Area was born simply for Ya Lingxian. Now that Ye Lingxian has inherited the legacy of the reincarnated queen, she is naturally valued by the forbidden area. When the future Queen Ye speaks, the elders and beasts in the forbidden area will obey her orders, whether out of love for their own lady or other reasons. Ye Lingxian shook her head gently with a sweet smile. It's not hard, I just went to Daofeng, but Brother Mu not only has to fight wits and courage with the enemy, but also has to make so many girls happy. Brother Mu is more tired. Muzian. Lingxian. Brother Mu doesn't need to explain anything to me, I understand. Ye Lingxian smiled lightly, and at the same time pressed the lock of the wild thyme that was about to move from her sleeves. Wait until Brother Mu recovers, then explain it to me slowly. Muzian looked at Ye Lingxian's innocent and pitiful smile in the sun, and for some reason, he felt a chill in his heart. He felt that the protagonist seemed to be a little dangerous after growing up. At this moment, he suddenly felt that someone seemed to be looking at him. He turned his head and saw Bairuoxi, who was wearing a beautiful plain white dress, with firm breasts and a thin waist, looking at him gently. Her cold temperament just matched the lilies in the courtyard. She had the fragility and purity of a young lady, and the charm and seduction of a young woman, which made it difficult to look away. What's wrong? Bairuoxi blinked and asked with her head tilted, a strand of hair cascading down and resting on her delicate face. It's okay. Muzian shook his head and smiled, and he felt a strong sense of crisis in his heart. It seems that after solving the problem of the first generation of Demon King, we have to find time to appease the fishes. It is nice to eat soft rice, but if you do not operate it properly one day, it will not be funny to be served by the heart lock, the wild thyme lock, etc. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will deal with it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. Time passed quickly, and 2 days passed unknowingly. In these 2 days, Muzian basically meditated and practiced in the room every day, refining 2 8th-grade pills. His originally damaged body repaired itself inexplicably during his coma a few days ago. Muzian himself did not know what happened. I think it should be something that the green skirt fairy did for him. But later Muzian asked her, but she refused to say, so Muzian did not continue to ask. People, after all, should leave some private space for others. 2 days later, a vast thunder tribulation hit the Tianhe garden where Muzian was. The thunder tribulation of Muzian's 3rd-grade soul refining. In just a few days, he jumped from the 2nd-grade soul refining to the 3rd-grade soul refining. If people from the outside world knew about it, they would probably be dumbfounded. After all, such a speed of cultivation is really too evil. Of course, if the cultivators from the outside world knew the truth, they would probably curse that it was a waste of heaven's gifts. If the 8th-grade elixir is used by the cultivators in the Return to Void realm, it is very likely that they will comprehend a trace of Taoism. Not to mention entering the Enlightenment realm, but at least they will be much stronger than the cultivators of the same realm. Nirvana pill, soul nourishing pill and a soul returning pill, a total of 3 8th-grade elixirs, except for the first one fed by the fairy Kinkan, the others were eaten directly by Muzian as beans. The first Nirvana pill strengthened his body, and the next 2 pills both nourished and strengthened his spiritual consciousness. It can be said that Muzian's strength improvement this time is not huge, but the foundation has been completely laid. If it had not been for this accidental death, the Nirvana pill would not have been able to be used. Similarly, the effects of the soul returning pill and the soul nourishing pill would not have been maximized. It can be said that Muzian's death this time was a blessing in disguise. With the help of 3 8th-grade elixirs, his body and spiritual consciousness are now comparable to the peak of God refining, and his physical strength is directly stretched. Boom! In front of the pilgrimage hall, pink peach blossoms swayed in the wind. It was already approaching the 12th lunar month of winter, but the peach blossoms in the pilgrimage hall were still in full bloom. Dark clouds rolled in the sky and thunder roared. At this moment, outside the pilgrimage hall, many scattered monks were watching this thunder disaster. Thunder tribulation is not uncommon for these sect disciples, so not many sect disciples were attracted by the thunder tribulation this time. However, this time, the eyes of all the sect disciples who came to the pilgrimage hall and saw AG were a little dull, even in disbelief. If I remember correctly, there were rumors a few days ago that the priest brother was killed after leaving the section. Why now? The news that Musian was attacked and killed a few days ago has spread throughout the section. According to the initial rumors, the explanation is probably, this time, the two ancient families in Dongzhou secretly colluded with demon cultivators to attack Yaokai. Musian. In order to help Qing Emperor overcome the calamity, one man stood in front of the Yaokai to resist the powerful enemy, and eventually died in battle. This news made many people in the sect stand in awe, and they gained a new understanding of this priest brother who had died in battle. Originally, Musian's appearance was quite good, and there were many female cultivators who secretly admired her in the section. However, the news of Musian's death in battle spread throughout the sect, and everything changed a little. It tastes good. In the eyes of some people, Musian seemed to be a tragic figure who was upright and fearless of powerful enemies. But now, this tragic figure who was supposed to have died in the battle is still alive and kicking around in front of the temple? If there is news in this world, the first hot search title is probably, #did his best #. Let's not talk about Yaokai first. What are the other ancient families doing? Hashtag why don't other ancient families help? Hashtag. Then after discovering that Musian was not dead, the hot search was, previous generation demon cultivator status #. Musian is still alive. Hashtag. If I remember correctly, the priest brother seemed to have only refined the first level of God when he left the sect, right? Less than a month has passed, and he has already refined the third level of God. After a short silence, someone finally spoke and broke the silence. And it's not that brother pastor is dead. Why would it happen now? Are there really ghosts in this world? Are you stupid? This is the Liangyi section. Not to mention whether there are ghosts. Even if there are indeed ghosts, can the ghosts survive the tribulation? At this time, someone suddenly pointed at the woman in the pilgrimage hall, and suddenly said, "Speaking of which, do you think there is anyone else in the pilgrimage hall?" It stands to reason that others should not approach easily when they are going through a tribulation, because they are likely to be involved in the thunder tribulation. When Musian was overcoming the tribulation just now, the thunder light was too dazzling and no one noticed it. It was only now after the thunder tribulation disappeared that they discovered that in the pilgrimage hall, there was actually a woman watching Musian's thunder at close range. Tribulation. Isn't she afraid of being involved? And when everyone was thinking about such a thing, Musian had already fallen lightly from the air, came to the front of Fairy Kinkin, and whispered something beside her. It looks like they know each other. Someone immediately saw the clues and said softly. Not to mention anything else, this priest brother is really good at seducing women. A senior brother sighed sincerely, feeling a little ready to ask Musian for advice on how to woo girls. Of course, some people are dismissive and think that monks should focus on cultivation. On this path of cultivation, emotions will only affect the speed of one's cultivation. However, I still couldn't help but look at the fairy who was wearing a green skirt and had an extraordinary temperament. Even though it's just a back view, you can tell from her lithe figure that this woman is definitely a top beauty. "Brother priest is out," someone suddenly said, and saw Musian leaving the pilgrimage hall with his sword. As if he was aware of the eyes of everyone outside, Musian immediately raised his hands and cupped his fists, saying, "Brothers and senior sisters, hello. Brother priest, are you a human or a ghost?" a timid senior sister asked cautiously. "Of course I am a human being. Haven't you seen the shadows on the ground?" "Can ghosts have shadows?" Musian said with a helpless smile. Then, feeling the vaguely terrifying aura behind him, he continued, my story is a bit long, so I'll leave it to you next time when I have the chance. It's best for everyone to stay away from this place. Someone is going to be here soon overcoming the tribulation. Brother Priest is joking. Even if it is a lightning disaster in the return to Void Realm, we will not be affected if we stand here. Don't worry too much, a senior brother said with a gentle smile. Boom. As soon as he finished speaking, the sunshine in the sky that was originally shining again because of the end of Musian's thunderstorm was obscured by light dark clouds. Then, a roar that seemed to resound through Dongzhou was heard in front of the pilgrimage hall. Resounding. The laughter just now was silent for a while, and everyone was stunned, looking at the figure of the green-skirted woman in the air with doubt. Under normal circumstances, even the thunder tribulation encountered by the immortals on land in the return to Void Realm would not have such a terrifying aura. Could it be the Enlightenment Realm? When someone mentioned this guess, another person shook his head and said, "The rules of heaven and earth now do not allow the Enlightenment Realm to appear. This should not be the Enlightenment Realm. Could it be the Hedeo?" It should have been a joke, but after the man finished speaking, he suddenly thought of something, subconsciously raised his head to look at the green-skirted fairy in the air with the moonlight covering her body, staring at her beautiful demeanor, and after a brief daze, he almost blurted out, "Kingdi." Many people reacted almost instantly after hearing this. This is the Kingdi's soul tribulation. Is this green-skirted fairy the Kingdi? This guess flashed through the minds of all the disciples like a bolt from the blue, and then all the disciples retreated tacitly. The thunder tribulation of the Hedeo realm, even if the Green Emperor could pay attention to control and not destroy everything in the pilgrimage hall, they would probably be affected, and could only avoid it as much as possible. However, why was Musian with the Green Emperor? At this moment, many disciples of the sect had strange thoughts in their hearts, but their eyes were always fixed on the fairy figure of the green skirt fairy, and both men and women had admiration in their eyes. Musian retreated to a remote corner, also staring at the flawless fairy figure of the green skirt fairy. There was no admiration in his eyes, just looking at her graceful figure set off by the strong wind, thinking about whether to suppress the fairy tonight. At this moment, he suddenly felt as if he was locked by something, and two paper cranes behind him flew silently towards his direction. A letter from the senior sister? But, how did she know that I was in the pilgrimage hall? Musian's eyes moved slightly, and he subconsciously reached out to take the two letters and opened them. The contents of the envelopes also appeared in his field of vision. The first one was written by the sect master's sister, and it basically asked him to go to Lianji Peak now. And the other one, was not written by the senior sister, but by the sect master. Almost at the moment of opening the other paper crane, Musian felt a slight burning sensation in the demon world mark in his body. A letter from the queen of the demon world. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 231. The mark of the demon world has reacted, which means that this letter should be written by a demon cultivator in the demon world, and such a violent reaction should be written by the demon queen. But where did that beautiful snake send the letter to me? Sister Ying. Musian thought as he opened the paper crane and looked at the contents of the letter. The first demon emperor was sealed by the Green Emperor for thousands of years. Now he is a candle in the wind, but even a spark should be careful not to burn into a big fire. The previous generation of demon cultivators and the western regions are mortal enemies, but the previous dynasty of the demon world and the southern wilderness have cooperated in the past. The southern wilderness will not help in times of trouble, but if you want to solve the first generation of demon emperor, you must take it down with thunder and lightning, and don't fight to the death. The combat power of the 9-life Sky Phoenix will increase with the battle. Once it finds that it can't escape, it will definitely burn its essence to drag other people down with it. Don't get close to it. You will be fine with the protection of that woman in the sect, but you must also be careful of the crisis in the dark. You are in the sect, and the remnants of the previous generation of demon cultivators don't have the courage to attack you, but we must also consider the external crisis. Her serious tone seemed to really want to teach me how to kill the first generation demon king. But the problem is that I, a small cultivator in the spirit refining realm, have no virtue or ability. Although Musian complained in his heart, there was a thoughtful look in his eyes. Should we say that the combat power of the first generation demon king is really amazing, or that the demon queen is too cautious? The first generation demon king was sealed by the Qing emperor for such a long time, and his spiritual energy has been almost exhausted. In this case, the demon queen actually wrote a letter to remind him. It seems that the first generation demon king is more capable of hiding than expected. It also shows that the queen attaches great importance to the first generation demon king and hopes to eradicate the scourge as soon as possible. Musian thought about this and continued to read the following contents of the letter. The death of Mr. Mu a few days ago caused a stir in Dongzhou. Your girlfriend seems to value you very much. With the protection of the restricted area and Lianji sect, I believe you will not encounter any danger in the future. However, your own strength is equally important. Once the shackles of the wasteland are bound, it is difficult to break free. Take care of yourself. The last words were more like a joke, but Musian did not expect that a demon queen would be so gossipy that she would even mention such things. Why does that woman care about me so much and even remind me to pay attention to safety? Musian read the contents of the letter and put the letter away, thinking about what the demon queen had just said. This demon queen is very thoughtful. Although she is not in Dongzhou, she is very observant. If I get together with that woman in the future, will I be caught cheating in seconds? And she seems to be able to read minds, which is a bit dangerous. In addition, the ability to charm is also unique. If she uses charm on me, isn't it finished? Musian thought about it and suddenly slapped his head. Why think so much now? Don't you think it's troublesome enough? If you don't stabilize it, you might be locked up in a small dark room one day. Although everyone is a good girl who feels sorry for Mr. Mu, the reaction they have shown recently is a little dangerous. For now, we must stabilize the situation before considering other things. Musian flew to Lianji Peak on his sword. It seemed that because they knew Musian would come, the formation of Lianji Peak was not activated and was completely open. He entered the pavilion he had been to last time, and in front of the pavilion, the sister of the sect leader had already sat at the table, leisurely drinking tea and playing chess by herself. Musian was not surprised, took a look at the chess pieces on the table. Every time she made a move, the white piece would follow, as if someone was playing chess with her, which was quite amazing. Musian sniffed slightly and smelled a faint scent of powder, a faint fragrance. Shang Yanfei was wearing a black dress embroidered with light blue flowers, with an elegant temperament, a waterfall of hair, and a full and upright chest supporting the fabric in front of the lapels. It seemed that she was wearing light makeup and dressed up much more beautifully than in the past impression. Is there a possibility that she dressed up for me? Musian teased himself in his heart. After seeing Shang Yanfei make a move, Musian said at the right time, "Master." Sit down casually. Shang Yanfei did not raise her head. Musian sat down opposite her, and then said respectfully, "Thank you for your help this time, Master. This kindness, even if I work like a cow or a horse in the future, I will repay you." Shang Yanfei paused slightly, raised her eyes and looked at him, with a faint smile in her eyes, and said, "You died because of saving the Qing Emperor, I should help you." Musian hesitated after hearing this, and said, "There is one thing I don't understand about this matter." Seeing that Shang Yanfei didn't speak, Musian continued to ask, "The first generation of Demon King has been making some small moves in secret recently. Once it knows that it can't get the Tiandan Phoenix fruit and the water of reincarnation, it will inevitably burn its essence. By then, Dongzhou may be in chaos." After thinking about it, Musian decided to throw the question to the sect master's sister. The first generation of Demon King is a strong man in the Hedeo realm. It can't be solved by conspiracy and tricks. Even if it is a seriously injured Hedeo realm, it can't be touched by conspiracy and tricks. What do you think? Shang Yanfei put down the chess piece, narrowed her eyes, and stared at him. Musian hesitated for a moment and said, if the first generation of Demon King burns essence, it depends on whether other powerful people can suppress it. If not, it may cause a large number of casualties. In addition, the remnants of the previous generation of demon cultivators may also make some moves in the near future. When he said this, Musian secretly observed the face of the sister of the sect master. She looked calm, but her eyes flickered slightly, as if she was thinking about what he had just said. Then, a faint arc appeared at the corner of her mouth. Today, several chiefs and elders went to the law enforcement hall to discuss the plan to capture the previous generation of demon cultivators. If you have any ideas, you can go there later. Shang Yanfei smiled. Musian shook his head and said, the younger generation has little influence, and those little cleverness may not be useful for macro plans. You don't have to be so humble. It's impossible to travel between the sect and the demon world in the past without some skills. Shang Yanfei smiled lightly. She really knew everything, but she didn't say it. Musian's heart was chilled. You don't have to worry about the first generation of demon kings. If you can, you just need to help the sect clean up the remnants of the previous generation of demon cultivators, Shang Yanfei said. Then, she changed the subject and said, this time, both the southern wilderness and the western region will send people to participate in the Ascension Conference. Do you have confidence? Musian shook his head. As a junior cultivator of the third level of spiritual cultivation, it is unlikely that I have confidence. He paused and continued, but, I still have confidence in some geniuses in the section. That day, the great powers in the southern wilderness and the western region proposed this bet, and they were naturally confident enough. The western region and the southern wilderness are not as rich as the eastern continent, but it does not mean that the talents of the geniuses are not as good as those in the eastern continent. In the final analysis, the physique of the evil gods in the southern wilderness is stronger than that of human cultivators. This gap is not shortened until they reach the return to void realm. But Shang Yanfei accepted the invitation at that time, and she was naturally confident enough. No one would have thought that in this competition, what really matters is not the geniuses in the sect, but an inconspicuous marginal figure. Musian's natural furnace will become the key to this Ascension Conference. The two chatted for a long time. Concubine Shang Yan was quite concerned about this young monk, probably because Musian was a disciple of the sect. Seeing that it seemed that the time was almost up, Musian asked to leave at the right time. From the beginning, Musian frequently heard the terrifying thunder roaring in the sky. It seemed that the Yuanshen tribulation of the Green Emperor was entering the peak stage. Once the Yuanshen tribulation is past, Dongzhou will have another Hedeo realm. Seeing Musian leave Lianji Peak, concubine Shang Yan played chess again. Not long after, Lan Mulian, who was wearing a white dress and had a cold temperament like snow, came to the pavilion and met the sect master. Master, was there anyone here just now? Lan Mulian hesitated for a moment and asked. Didn't you know this a long time ago? Shang Yanfei glanced at her own disciple with a faint smile in her eyes, and continued, if you go to chase him now, it's still in time. I don't have anything to do with him. Lan Mulian paused, staring at the peerless beauty in a black dress, and suddenly said, does the formation in the sect need to be prepared in advance? In the Lianji sect, there is a peerless formation. Among the 9 peaks, each main peak is a formation eye. The leaders of the 9 peaks can activate the formation eye together to activate the sect's formation. Lan Mulian mentioned this at this time, obviously knowing about the first generation of Demon King. I have asked them to prepare. Shang Yanfei twisted a chess piece with her fingertips, with a faint smile in her eyes. It can't make too much waves. Is this also the result of deducing the secrets of heaven? Lan Mulian asked. This does not need to be deduced. Shang Yanfei's words were calm and indifferent. Then, Yu Yu said, if you don't know the future will not change. But once you deduce the secrets of heaven and know the future, this ending may be rewritten. Once the ending may change, maybe I will be powerless. So it's better not to deduce the secrets of heaven. Lan Murian hesitated a little and said, is there something that master can't do? In the eyes of Lianji sect and even some elders of ancient families in Dongzhou, this sect master is extremely mysterious and powerful. As long as she is in Dongzhou, it is impossible to fall. Even in Musian's eyes, he still has offered her in his heart so far. Shang Yanfei held her cheeks with her hands, and looked at her disciples with clear eyes like cold ponds. Of course. I'm not invincible either, she smiled. Lan Murian was silent, just took a deep look at the platinum chain hanging on Shang Yanfei's wrist under her sleeves when she held her cheeks. This thing used to be on Shang Yanfei's body. And this chain locked her herself. Musian is still alive. If few people knew about this news not long ago, then as Musian left Lianji Peak and flew to the law enforcement hall, people began to notice him. At this moment, in the Qingyang Hall on the south bank, many cultivators were competing and fighting, and it was not very lively. When Musian entered the Qingyang Hall, many cultivators who were gambling on sect points in the Qingyang Hall noticed him one after another, and the originally lively atmosphere seemed to have a little more weirdness. Musian. Isn't he dead? How could he? Some people whispered in secret, looking at Musian with some doubts. Some of them personally asked the elders in the main peak and confirmed that Musian was indeed dead. As a result, this man appeared in front of them alive and kicking at this moment, which inevitably made people a little surprised. Pastor brother, are you a human or a ghost? In the Qingyang Hall, a senior sister with an above-average appearance stared with beautiful eyes, with confusion and a light hidden in her eyes. I don't know if it's an illusion, but she always feels that Musian's appearance is much more handsome than before. This kind of handsomeness does not refer to the change in appearance, but the mental state of the whole person, and even the change in temperament. Tianchen Gliding absorbed a wisp of Chaorime from each of the 3 8th grade elixirs. Musian could not feel this Chaorime, but it was preserved in Tianchen Gliding. And this Chaorime, for cultivators, is an irresistible temptation. Even if they don't know that Musian is Tianchen Gliding, and don't know that he has the Chaorime left by the 8th grade elixir in his body, they will still be attracted to him. Musian looked up and smiled, sister, have you ever seen a ghost with a shadow on the ground? The sister took courage and stepped forward. She stretched out her finger and gently poked Musian's body. Only then did she find to her surprise that this junior brother was still alive and well. You are not dead, you are still alive. Thank you for your concern, this time it can be regarded as a blessing in disguise. Musian smiled reservedly, intending to show the beautiful image of a pure boy. Then, he bowed to everyone and walked straight into the depths of the hall. After reporting to the guarding disciples, he soon came to the depths of the law enforcement hall. He was going to the law enforcement hall to explain that he had returned to the sect. After completing these complicated procedures, Musian quickly returned to Tianhe Garden. The maid was sitting in front of the courtyard, staring at the pond in a daze, as if thinking about something. This yellow-skirted maid is usually very low-key, and her makeup is also simple. There are exquisite jewelry in her hair, which sets off her cold and beautiful face. Sensing someone approaching, she looked up slightly and saw Musian slowly walking to her side. Sister Mengru is in a daze alone, are you thinking about me? Musian said with a joking tone. Wei Mengru glanced at Musian with contempt. She was already accustomed to the young master's flowery words, so she didn't bother to pay attention. Then she paused for a moment and suddenly said, the smell on your body is getting more and more tempting. Why does Sister Mengru sound like a pervert who is obsessed with smells? Musian complained. Wei Mengru frowned slightly and said, I'm not kidding you. I know. Musian smiled. The more good things there are in the natural furnace, the more tempting it will be. Musian also knows this very well. If he doesn't send some more, he may become a walking treasure house. Being too popular is not a good thing. At least it's not a good thing for his current situation. If it's not stable, the orca cubs in the fish pond will probably come ashore to eat the fish pond owner. I'll take care of it later, Musian continued. Find a time tonight to send Ruoxi a portion of Daoyun and spiritual energy to strengthen the physique. Then find a time another day to find other people. It's a pity that Sister Mengru is still so cold, otherwise I can send her a portion. Musian looked at Wei Mengru's graceful figure outlined by the yellow skirt, and he couldn't help feeling a little regretful. I'll take care of it later. Does it mean you plan to go out later? Wei Mengru frowned slightly and reminded, although it's in the sect, it's a special period now, so you still have to be careful. This time, the first generation of the Demon King may have known that the Green Emperor was going through the tribulation. He would not sit and wait for death. If he found that he couldn't escape, he would probably burn his essence and fight desperately. Add to that the demon cultivators of the previous generation lurking in the dark, Musian might be in danger. It is because of the previous demon cultivators and the private affairs that I plan to come back to take a bath and sort myself out, and then go see my master, Musian said. The so-called bath refers to a medicinal bath, which can speed up the recovery of the spiritual energy in his cauldron. What does the demon cultivator of the previous generation have to do with going to the library? Wei Mengru looked at Musian with doubt. Before leaving, the fairy sister personally set up the formation in Yaokai. Now no one can enter Yaokai, Musian said slowly. As for the water of reincarnation, it is even more impossible for them to get it. It is as difficult as ascending to heaven to get the water of reincarnation from the restricted area. Even Musian, it was because of his identity as the future son-in-law of the restricted area, coupled with Yalingxuan's persuasion and other factors, that he was able to obtain the water of reincarnation. The elders in the sect now want to get rid of the remnants of the previous generation of demon cultivators to avoid unnecessary trouble. Musian paused and continued, if the news that I have the Tiandan phoenix fruit suddenly spreads at this time, what do you think the remnants of the previous generation of demon cultivators hiding in the dark will do? Attacking you? Musian shook his head. In the sect, they can't do anything to me under the eyes of so many leaders. So, they will change their target. When Musian said this, he glanced at Wei Mengru's slender legs under her thin yellow skirt, and suddenly said, Sister Mengru, let's make a bet. What bet? Wei Mengru saw Musian's gentle smile, but her eyes were inexplicably alert. If I can eliminate the remnants of the previous generation of demon cultivators, you will obey my orders, and vice versa, I will obey your orders. How about that? Musian asked. Wei Mengru hesitated and did not answer. She always felt that her young master had bad intentions. Sister Mengru, don't we even have this little trust between us? Do you think I will hurt you? Musian sighed softly. After a brief hesitation, Wei Mengru nodded gently and said, okay. Looking at the cold and somewhat uneasy look of the yellow-skirted maid, Musian showed a simple smile. It's a deal. The plan of letting the maid wear black and white silk, and stare at him with her hands on her chest in humiliation, is only one step away.